Well, good morning to those who have already joined in. We're very excited for you all to be joining us today. We are going to give a few more minutes as people are joining on to the webinar. So thank you so much for your patience as we get started this morning. All right, well, it is 9:10, so to be respectful of everyone's time, we are going to go ahead and get started. So good morning, and thank you all so much again for joining us. This is Immunized DC 2022 Virtual Summit with the topic of coexisting with COVID. So I have the privilege of being able to host this webinar today. My name is Dr. Damika Walker. I'm the chair of Immunized DC, and I am a licensed pharmacist in the District of Columbia as well as Maryland. I currently practice in Maryland. I'm a pharmacy manager at Walgreens, but I'm so excited just to be able to be here and be able to talk with other healthcare professionals in the district about immunization rates and really how we are doing as we are, again, coexisting with COVID. So first, I just want to thank all of you for being able to join in. I want to thank you all for the hard work that you are doing in the midst of still in a pandemic. I don't think we thought that 2 years later, we would still be in the space that we're in. However, we have definitely been able to make progress. We've been resilient. So I just want to thank you and appreciate you all for all that you do, for all of your work, and most importantly, for taking time out of your busy schedules to join with us on this virtual summit today. So we would have loved to have seen all of your beautiful faces in person, but we are so privileged to be able to have access to technology so that we can still meet with each other and be able to discuss some really important topics as it surrounds immunizations in the district. So again, thank you and welcome to all of you. So we're gonna go and briefly, we're just going to go over today's agenda. So, of course, we're going to start with a program overview and a DC update given by myself. From there, we're going to go to a CDC immunization update, and then we're going to take a quick 15-minute break so you can stretch your legs a little bit, because I know how it is with Zoom calls. You get a little antsy, so we do want to give you a little bit of a break in between speakers. From there, we'll come back at 11 to speak on building vaccine confidence, and then we're going to round it out with a speaker from the Black Coalition Against COVID and Immunization Coalition in regards to promoting immunization rates in the District of Columbia. And after that, we will adjourn. So hopefully it will be a very impactful 4 hours that you have with us, that you'll gain some information that you did not know, and that it will also encourage you and propel you to continue in the work that we are doing and in regards to immunization rates in the district. So as you all know, today's event is for CE credit. So again, your time spent with us is not in vain. So of course, we will send out the information at the end of the CE on how you can get those credits. However, in regard to the target audience today, of course, it's intended for doctors, nurses, as well as pharmacists who are engaged in providing immunizations and immunization education to persons of all ages. So at the conclusion of today's summit, we hope that all of you will be able to identify potential missed opportunities for vaccination due to the pandemic and increase immunization rates within your practice setting. We also want you to be able to identify reasons for vaccine hesitancy, as well as utilize lessons learned to respond to vaccine hesitancy in our local community. We want you to be able to describe the latest data and recommendations on COVID-19 vaccination and implement those into your various practice settings. And we also would like for you to be able to describe latest data and recommendations on routine immunizations and implement those in your practice setting as well. Lastly, the last educational objective is to identify methods for increasing vaccine confidence and utilizing those strategies to increase your immunization rates in your practice. So again, we just want to make sure that when you leave today, you have the information, but also the tools to be able to affect change in your practice settings and for your patients. So here are the CE disclosures for the speakers for today. It is there. I don't have to read it for you, but of course we do have to put it into our presentation. And then again, as I said, in regards to being able to request CE credit, this information will go out to you at the conclusion of the webinar. So please make sure that you don't miss an opportunity to be able to log these hours and put it towards your CE hour requirements for your specific practice. And then this is the joint accreditation statement. So in support of improving patient care, this activity has been planned and implemented by the Postgraduate Institute for Medicine and Immunized Dc. The Postgraduate Institute for Medicine is jointly accredited by the Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education, the Accreditation Council for Pharmacy Education, as well as the American Nurses Credentialing Center to provide continuing education for the healthcare team. And then again, these are just more disclaimers as well as how your credits will be designated. Okay, so now that we have all the housekeeping out of the way, we will go ahead and get into just who we are as the coalition. So we hope that a lot of you who are joining with us today are already partnered with Immunized DC, but for those of you who are not, we do just want to give you a little bit of history about how we came to be, and also just those things that we focus on as a coalition. So Immunized DC was actually formerly known as the Immunization Coalition of Washington, DC. And it was actually a collaboration of two separate coalitions. So it was the Community Immunization Coalition of DC, which was the district's childhood coalition. And then it was also the DC Coalition for Prevention, which focused more so on the adult immunization coalition. So at that point, they were separate, one focusing more on children, the other one focusing more on immunization rates for adults. So prior to the year 2000, the two coalitions pretty much had the same members and nonprofit organizations that were involved in both of them. So they decided in June of 2000 to combine the two coalitions. And that is how the Immunized Coalition of Washington, DC was created. So now, of course, Immunized DC, we do focus on immunization rates for all persons. The vision of Immunized DC is a new generation of healthy and informed DC families, fully protected from vaccine-preventable diseases across the lifespan. So basically, our hope, our desire, the work that we do is to be able to make the District of Columbia not only just a healthier place to live and work and play, but also we want our coalition to be able to contribute to reaching national immunization goals. So we want it to expand outside of just the DC area. We really want to make sure that we're promoting immunizations and promoting the importance of making sure that all persons of all ages are vaccinated against these vaccine preventable diseases. Our mission is saving lives and improving health in the District of Columbia, mobilizing partners and community members, of course, to meet that critical need, which is getting immunized. So there are core activities that we as a coalition do focus on. So a little bit of background of how does it work? How do we meet up? So we do meet monthly. Before the pandemic, we were meeting once a month in person, and all of our different partners who were able to come would join together and we would discuss different topics. Now, because of the pandemic, we have been meeting virtually. However, because of that, we have been able to reach a larger platform. So people who may not have been or had the flexibility to come into DC to meet now can join the call. So it actually works out that we are able to collaborate with more members by us being virtual. But each time that we come together, we do have our core activities that we have as the foundation for our coalition. So the first is being able to identify and work to overcome barriers to immunization. We all know that people don't just neglect getting immunized because they're anti-vaccine. There are also other barriers that have to be addressed, that have to be overcome in order so that we can increase these immunization rates. So we definitely have different work groups that we break down into within the coalition in order to focus on different areas and different segments of those barriers and how we can better overcome them. Also, a core activity is to promote culturally appropriate public and provider awareness and education. And that may be from having outside speakers come in and speak with us just to continue to provide that information and education that we need so that we can continue to then disseminate that information to our patient population. Another activity is to develop and implement strategies to elicit provider and community involvement to raise and sustain immunization rates. Of course, activities to support activities in the collection of data through the use of tools such as the DC Central Immunization Registry, which is extremely helpful to, I'm sure that all of you have access to that in your practices, which I hope you do, that being the dosage system, so that we are able to go in and see where our patients are in regards to their vaccination status, so that we can make sure that when we make our recommendations, we are recommending all vaccines that our patients will be eligible for to make sure that they are staying up to date. The coalition also advocates for policies that promote governmental support of immunization activities. And then lastly, we support and promote partnerships with regional immunization organizations or groups. So the most important thing that we know as a coalition is that it definitely takes a village. No one person, no one organization can make this work. So we are very much involved with collaborating with other organizations, other groups that also have the same goal and vision of increasing those rates so that we can make more headway and make more of an impact in our district residents. So here listed are some of our diverse partners that we are so fortunate to be able to partner with. So as you can see from the list, it's anywhere from pharmacies, to the school boards, of course, to pharma, and pretty much everything in between. So again, the purpose of that is to make sure that we're using every connection, every avenue that we can to make sure that we're meeting the needs of as many people as we can. So I challenge you, if you do not see your organization listed as one of our partners, we definitely would love for you to join our work. We need all of your insight, all of your wisdom, all of your expertise. So please, again, if you do not see your organization listed and you are interested in how you can become involved with the coalition, you can always reach out to us at the end of the CE through our program director, Ms. Dina Penner, who is the glue that holds this all together. And she will definitely make sure that you're plugged in so that you get those monthly invites to the coalition meetings. And very exciting news, we have a new brand, but we also have a new website that is coming out. So it will be www.dcimmunized.org. And this basically will just be a platform for us to tag important information, different changes as they come out as it relates to vaccinations for children as well as adults. So it'll be a very nice platform for you to be able to go for different resources that you need so that you're not having to go everywhere that you can to try to find that information that may help you. So we are very excited about the new launch of our website, which should be coming very soon, hopefully before the end of summer is the goal. So we are very close for it launching. But again, we do want you to write down this website address so that, again, when it does go live, please make sure that you utilize it, again, as a place to be able to access resources as things change, as we know daily, it seems like, regarding immunization. So it's just will be a very great platform for us to be able to house information for us. So speaking of partnerships, we are very fortunate to be able to partner with DC Health. We've been working with DC Health for almost 20 years now. And it began as coalition partners, which led to collaboration on meetings, special events, and initiatives. As I was saying before, one of the core activities is a lot of the training that would go on in the district as far as training nurses or teachers or whatever it is pertaining to the students in the classroom and students in school, just making sure they're vaccinated up to date. So a lot of that training was in collaboration with DC Health and Immunized DC. But in 2017, DC Health grantee is working to bring together a multidisciplinary group of healthcare professionals promoting immunization in the district. So again, we're very excited to be able to work closely with DC Health to help move those initiatives forward as a coalition. So just to give a little bit of an overview of where we stand as a district. Now, please, as a disclaimer, I am not employed by DC Health. So if you do have specific questions, I'm probably not the best person to ask. So this is going to be very much just an overview, top view, looking down on some of the immunization rates as they are in the district. This information, however, was provided by DC Health, and these particular numbers that I have on the screen right now are actually as of yesterday. So these are very accurate, up-to-date numbers as far as reporting out in regards to the immunizations that have been, the vaccinations that have been administered for the COVID vaccine. So again, today we're going to be talking about COVID, but also just immunizations in general, because we know that the COVID vaccine is not the only vaccine that is important for our DC residents. However, this particular slide is specific to the COVID vaccines that have been administered. So we are, of course, very excited that now they do have a vaccine for our little babies. So we are very excited to see parents taking advantage of getting their toddlers and their younger children vaccinated against COVID as well. So you'll see based on the graph that it is broken down by age group as in regards to the coverage of persons in the district that have been either completed their full primary series or have started the primary series. So again, this information does not show any of the booster shot information. So as of right now, as of yesterday, it's been over 1.6 million doses that have been administered within DC. So the estimated percentage of residents that have at least started the series is 97.3%, which is great. But we're still only about 77% that have actually completed their primary series. So we know there's still that work to do in order to get patients in to complete that series. And then of course, ultimately getting them boosted so that they are considered to be up to date. But again, if we look at the graph, we of course see or were to expect that the individuals that were in that 65 to 74 age group, of course, are the persons that have completed their series, which was at 92%, which we knew that was the core, was making sure that we were vaccinating our seniors against COVID. But then we also see that the numbers for our 5 to 11 group are only at 43% that have completed the series. And so that is that number that we're really trying to target, especially as children are going back to school. How do we get them vaccinated, not only just against COVID, but making sure that they're up to date on all of their other vaccines. So we're clearly aware, you all are aware, that the vaccination rates dropped dramatically with the pandemic, just simply because people did not feel comfortable going into the doctor's office. People were trying to isolate and stay as far away from doctor's offices and just those type of areas, hospitals and things of that sort. During that time, a lot of people weren't getting their well child visits, and adults as well weren't going in to get their physicals. So, but especially with our children, we saw a large decline. And especially as they were doing school from home, I guess some may not have thought that it was as important to keep them up to date, but now that they have transitioned back into school, we know that it is really important that we do the work to get the information out and to really encourage and empower our parents to make sure that they're getting their children vaccinated. So basically, again, from this group, we can see that that 5 to 11 age group, as well as 18 to 24 age groups, so our younger adults, we need a little bit more work in making sure that we get those vaccination rates up. So again, transitioning more into specifically how this translates into the school. So there are non-compliant students in DC. This data was pulled as of May 2022, and they found that the number of non-compliant students was almost 30,000, and the rate of non-compliant students was around 26.79%. Now, again, there are various reasons as to how those numbers are impacted. Again, unfortunately, I do not have that exact breakdown of that. But again, the point is that is a very large number of students that are still non-compliant, meaning not up to date with their routine pediatric vaccinations. Also on this graph, we can see that it is broken down based on the school type. So the public school versus charter versus private versus parochial. And we can see that, of course, the largest number of students that it does impact is from the public school system. DC Health also went a step further as to break that down into the different wards. So this is a table of student noncompliance per ward from the highest percentage of noncompliance to the lowest percentage. And so this is broken down again based off of the school that's in that ward. So the school being either, if it's, like I said, one of the charter schools, parochial schools, whichever school is in that district, that is how this is broken down. Not necessarily based off of the ward that the student may live in. So again, we can see that Ward 3 is at the top of the list, followed by Ward 4 and so on and so forth. So again, this chart is a nice way for us to be able to see where that messaging needs to go in order to really make sure that we're reaching those parents and making sure that they have the information that they need. And like I said, feel empowered to make sure that they're vaccinating their children and getting them up to date. So again, why does this matter? Why is this so important now? Well, it has been announced that going into this fall school year, they are doing the campaign, No Shots, No School. So basically what that means is that all DC students have to be up to date before their next school year. And if they are not up to date, they may be removed from school until they receive their required immunizations and provide that documentation to the school. Now, again, I do not know the details of what that would look like or how that would translate as far as when they may be removed from school or how that may play out. But the point is, we don't want it to get to that point, right? We want our children to be able to be in school. We have seen how some children struggled not being in the classroom setting, trying to learn virtually. We know the importance of in-person learning, not only just for the knowledge piece, but just for the socialization piece for our children. So it's so important that we are making sure that they are in school, which means we have to make sure that these children are immunized, and not just so they can go to school, but we want them to be healthy. We want them to be safe. We want to protect our children. And so again, the campaign now is No Shots, No School. So we want to make sure that they stay on track. So this is put out by Acip and DC Health. And again, this is more so just ways that we can encourage parents, our patients, specifically the parents of the children, on really what those next steps look like in order for them to make sure they are keeping them up to date, and how we can help keep them up to date. So first things first, of course, is always to encourage our parents to schedule their child's annual wellness visit. So we know that it is very important. Going into those annual visits helps the pediatricians to be able to meet with the parents, and also to be able to assess, again, what vaccines patients, their pediatric patients need. So with that being said, they also are encouraging healthcare providers to complete the Universal Health Certificate. As I said, Dosis is an amazing tool in order to be able to access the immunization records for the district residents. However, there have been some hiccups and there have been some challenges that DC Health is working on in improving the registry to make sure that all the information is input, especially since they did transition into a new platform. So with that being said, it's really important that we advocate for parents when they're going in and getting their child vaccinated, that they are getting written proof that their child has been immunized against certain vaccine preventable diseases. So again, we want to make sure they are aware that there's a Universal Health Certificate, make sure that they are getting that completed so that they can provide that to the schools. Of course, make sure that they have received all their immunizations. So again, how do they know if they've received them or not? We really have to empower our parents and make sure that they're reaching out to their children's doctor's offices. Or again, if they are going somewhere outside of the doctor's office, i.e. clinics, healthcare clinics, or pharmacies, to get their child vaccinated, that they are doing their part to make sure that they have records of that. So again, that they can provide that to the school. And then lastly, the last step is for them to, of course, submit those immunization documents to their school. Excuse me, again, it's important for the parents to make sure they're in communication with the schools to know what information they already have so that nothing will interfere with their children being able to start school on time. So again, these are just things as we're meeting with patients, like I said, regardless of what setting that we work in, making sure that we're asking the parents, are your children up to date? Do you know what's needed for them to be up to date? Are you aware that if they're not up to date with their immunizations, they can't start in the fall, right? A lot of it just has to do with providing the information. If someone doesn't know, then they can't be held accountable for what they don't know. So DC Health is doing a great job of getting this information out. But again, we want to make sure that we're doing our part too, as we are seeing our patients, to make sure that they're informed, that they have the information that they need, and that we assist them in any capacity possible to make sure that our children are vaccinated, that they are safe, and that they are able to start school in the fall. So DC Health has other immunization strategies that they're also implementing right now. Again, in regards to outreach and making sure that the district residents are up to date and aware of what's going on. They are sending out postcards, letters, they're doing phone calls, robocalls. So again, they are doing everything that they can to get this messaging out so that no one is blindsided at the beginning of the school year, that their children have to be up to date in order to start school. They're also doing well child campaigning. And again, as I said, the No Shots, No School campaign. Of course, they're partnering with us, Immunized DC, as well as managed care organizations. In addition to Department of Healthcare Finance, they have initiatives that they're doing as well to make sure, again, that we are getting the messaging out. And then, of course, increasing community access. So as I said, it's not always just as simple as getting parents to come into the doctor's offices. Sometimes we have to go to them based off of different situations that may hinder them from being able to make it to their well child visits. So they are having mobile vaccination clinics. Of course, they're going to have school-based health center open access. They are encouraging for more pharmacies to get enrolled in vaccines for children, mass vaccination events, as well as a map of pediatric immunization locations. So again, the most important thing is being able to get that information out to allow there to be multiple access points for parents to be able to get their children vaccinated. So DC Health, again, has a lot that they're doing to really just help make sure that this initiative that they're rolling out is able to actually work. You know, it's one thing to say that children have to be vaccinated, something else that we don't provide the resources for that to happen. So again, we definitely applaud DC Health for all of their hard work, for everything that they're doing. And again, applauding you all for all that you're doing to make sure that your patients are vaccinated. So again, this is just the information for DC Health. If you have any other questions or if you would like to go and get more information as far as what DC Health is doing, they also have great resources to use in your practices. You can, of course, go to dchealth.dc.gov. And that will take you to all of the different links and resources so that you can make sure that you're up to date and aware of the changes that are going on in DC. So as far as next steps, collaborate with Immunized DC, of course. So again, all of this is, again, just kind of been an overview of who we are as a coalition, giving an example of one of the partnerships that we do have, but most importantly, just to let you know that we are here to really do the work in the district to really help our residents. And that does not happen with just a few of us. So the more people that we have, the easier it helps us to get this agenda pushed. So we definitely encourage you, again, if this is your first time hearing of Immunized DC, that you collaborate with us, that you stay in contact with us, and that you can really partner with us so that we can continue to increase these immunization rates. Like I said, not just in the district, but overall, we want to really make sure that we are making an impact in regards to vaccinations. So with that, I think I have done enough talking for now, and so that you all can really start hearing from our wonderful speakers that we are going to have today. So again, just a few other housekeeping rules. There is a Q&A feature that you all should have access to. So at any point during the presentations today, if you come up with any questions that you have, please make sure that you put it in the Q&A box so that our speakers can definitely address those at the end of their presentation. So again, please don't be shy. That is what we're here for. We wish, again, we were in person, but even though we are not, we still want to make sure that you're engaged and that you get your questions answered. So please make sure to utilize that functionality. And again, the speakers will address those questions at the end of their presentations. All right. So I'm so excited to be able to introduce our first speaker for this morning. And that will be Dr. Andrew Kroger. So as he gets set up, I will give a brief introduction for Dr. Kroger. So Dr. Andrew Kroger is a medical officer in the Communication and Education branch of the Immunization Services Division at the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, Office of Infectious Diseases at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. As one of the trainers in the Communication Education branch, Dr. Kroger has given multiple presentations on topics ranging from immunization updates to pandemic influenza preparedness. So we know that we are in very good hands today. Dr. Kroger will be doing his presentation on the CDC immunization updates. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Kroger, for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Damika. It's wonderful to be here. I hope you all can hear me. And I will share my screen. So hopefully you can see the first title slide of my presentation. I'm very, very pleased to have the opportunity to give you an immunization update today. I need to make a few disclosures. I'm a federal government employee with no financial interest or conflict with the manufacturer of any product named in this presentation. I'm not going to discuss the off-label use of any vaccines. I am going to discuss all COVID-19 vaccines authorized in the U.S., and that includes the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine, which, unlike the Pfizer COVID or Moderna COVID vaccines, is not approved or licensed by the FDA. Any use of trade names is for identification purposes and does not imply any endorsement by the ACIP or CDC. And as I mentioned in the title, the recommendations I'll be discussing are primarily those of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP. The ACIP is composed of 15 experts in clinical medicine and or public health. They typically meet 3 times a year in Atlanta and vote on vaccine decisions, which have been structured by individual ACIP work groups throughout the year. These decisions revolve around new vaccines or new uses of old vaccines. And in this way, the ACIP provides guidance on the use of vaccines and other biologic products to the Department of Health and Human Services, CDC, and the U.S. Public Health Service. Now, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the ACIP has been meeting still publicly, but they've really been meeting on a much more rapid, frequent basis, almost monthly at times, and they've been meeting virtually to discuss primarily potential uses of the COVID-19 vaccines. But they are also talking about non-COVID-19 vaccines, and I'm going to talk about both today. The next scheduled meeting of the ACIP is October 19th and 20th, 2022, but that's the routine schedule. There very well may be another meeting before that in the interim to discuss, COVID-19 issues. So as an overview, I'll begin with COVID-19 vaccine, give some background and highlight COVID-19 recommendations. I'll cover that which has been posted on CDC's website, so I'll be able to really accommodate the ACIP meeting from the past 2 weeks on COVID issues. Then I'll move on to the non-COVID-19 portion, the new schedules, and I say new, they came out in February, March, and there have been some new ACIP recommendations published in the last year. I'll talk about dengue vaccine, zoster, hepatitis B, pneumococcal Rex, and recent combination vaccine in addition. So beginning with COVID-19 vaccination, of course, the disease COVID-19 was first identified in Wuhan, China in December of 2019. It's caused by the virus SARS-CoV-2. Early on, many patients were reported to have a link to a large seafood and live animal market, but later they found cases that did not have exposure to these animal markets, which indicated person-to-person spread. And that was either via respiratory droplets or airborne transmission. The first case in the United States was reported on January 20th, 2020. For really detailed information on the most up-to-date status of disease, I've give you the URL in the last bullet. So it has been 29 months since the first case was reported. We do continue to see substantial burden of disease, over 86 million cases and over 1 million deaths. In the United States, COVID vaccine is recommended for everyone now 6 months and older. When we look at how we're doing with our coverage rates, 67% of the US population is fully vaccinated. 47% of the population has received a first booster dose. Granted, not everyone is eligible, but we really have to now maximize the proportion of people in the United States fully vaccinated and their booster dose. The vaccine prevents the serious outcomes of COVID-19, including hospitalization and death. When we hear about the efficacy and effectiveness numbers, and I'm not going to really cover this today, but you have to tease that out when we're talking about effectiveness for disease and effectiveness versus the severe outcomes. This is a vaccine for prevention of the severe outcomes. And we see severe outcomes across the age span. Since the pandemic began, there have been 600 pediatric deaths. When I discuss COVID-19 vaccines today, and I'm going to be discussing the two mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, as well as the Janssen product. In most situations currently, the Pfizer and Moderna mRNA vaccines are the preferred product over the Janssen product. Some background now, when I discuss vaccines, there are a couple concepts I like to cover, and one is the process by which CDC develops a guideline. So for COVID-19 vaccines, there have really been two processes. They both begin with a review of the data on safety and immunogenicity, and a lot of the early ACIP meetings really hit hard on implementation issues. And so then that's where the fork in the road occurs. And for regulatory purposes, vaccines can either be authorized with an emergency use authorization by the FDA, or with kind of a longer term process of data review. A vaccine can eventually either begin or transition from authorization to approval, or what we call licensure. This is when the manufacturer submits a biologics licensing application. Regardless of which of those two pathways in the middle row by the FDA, what happens next is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices will look at the data, make a recommendation, and then the CDC will issue guidelines on the basis of ACIP's vote. So there are 3 currently available COVID-19 vaccines in the US. There's the 2 mRNA vaccines, right? So there's the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, or BTNT162b2. I'll call it the Pfizer vaccine. It's also licensed under the trade name Comirnaty. Then there's the Moderna vaccine, which is another mRNA 1273. It's licensed under the name Spikevax. And then you have the Janssen vaccine, AD26-CoV2S vaccine, which is only authorized, it's not approved or licensed. Now, there is a 4th vaccine that's been licensed, or not licensed, but authorized. This is Novavax. It is not yet available, so I don't really discuss it today. So the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, you can see the ages for which they're approved in the top row. A bit about these vaccines. So this consists of a strand of mRNA that enters, injected into the recipient, And in the cytoplasm of the recipient cell, the host cell, the antigen is actually generated by the host. It's translated into the spike protein, and that generates the immune response. It makes it different from other vaccines. The Janssen vaccine is called a vector vaccine. It's actually an adenovirus vector with the SARS-CoV-2 genes embedded. And so what happens with this vaccine is it enters upon injection, it enters into the cell. It does enter into the nucleus. The genome is not incorporated into the host genome, but like the mRNA vaccines, the host, the patient actually generates the antigen that generates the immune response. There is some immune response to the vector itself as well that gets generated. So it's not exactly the same as an mRNA product, but that's how the mechanism by which these vaccines work. And you can see the authorization on this slide. For Pfizer, it's 6 months through 15 years. For Moderna, it's 6 months through 17 years. And for Janssen, it's 18 years and older. The number of doses in the primary series of vaccine. So for the Pfizer, it's a 3-dose primary series for persons 6 months through 4 years of age, and 2 doses for persons 5 years and older. Primary series of Moderna vaccine is 2 doses, and Janssen is a 1-dose vaccine. The interval between the first and second dose of the Pfizer vaccine is 3 to 8 weeks, and the interval between the second and third dose is 8 weeks. For Moderna, it's a 4 to 8 week interval between the 2 doses. And that's going to vary. We want it to be a little bit shorter if a patient is immunosuppressed to maximize the immune response quickly, or if someone is an older adult, give the primary series doses kind of more compressed. If someone is an adolescent, we prefer more spacing, like 8 weeks, but it's not fixed. So it's just kind of loose guidance in that sense. And I'll make a point of mentioning, because since this slide is all about timing, that any patient who has natural COVID-19 vaccine could delay onset of a dose of vaccine for 3 months. We know that natural disease provides an immune response, so it is reasonable to wait 3 months before proceeding to the next dose. We'll talk a little bit about kind of some mechanics of the vaccine, and here's Pfizer, and so we're talking about first different groups, and I'm actually going to start on the right side of this chart and work to the left. So the gray and the right, product for ages 12 years and older. We're most familiar with that one. It has a gray cap. It used to come in a purple cap. I don't think the purple cap is being distributed any longer. I'm not sure, it's gone from all the shelves, but sorry. It's gone from all the shelves. But the volume is 0.3 mils cc's, and moving to the middle column, it's 5 through 11 years of age. It's a orange cap vial with a different volume, 0.2 cc's. And then for persons 6 months through 4 years of age, it's a 0.2 cc maroon cap. And you can also see the dose of mRNA concentration, which tells you that that this vaccine you can't interchange. Do not try to interchange, even if you can figure out some mathematics with concentrations. Use the formulation for which the vaccine is intended. Dilution is required for maroon cap and orange cap, but not for the gray cap. And the number of doses you can obtain from each vial, it's 10 from the maroon, 10 from the orange, and 6 from the gray. So on this slide, I'm going to ask you to focus on the chart on the lower left side of the screen primarily. This is Moderna, and I'm also going to start on that specific chart. I'm going to start on the right side, so that vial with the red cap. This is Moderna vaccine for persons 12 years old and older. The volume of the primary series is 0.5 cc's. Now, this vaccine can be used as a booster dose for persons 18 years old and older. And if used as a booster dose, note that the volume is 0.25 cc's for those adults. Persons who receive a dose of COVID-19 vaccine prior to the age of 5 years is not recommended for any booster at all. Persons and also persons who receive a dose of Moderna vaccine, or sorry, I should restate that. Moderna vaccine is not recommended as a booster dose as well. So for boosters, we're really only talking about 18 and older for Moderna. No one younger than 18 years of age can receive Moderna as a booster. And persons who receive a dose of COVID-19 vaccine prior to the age of 5 years with Moderna vaccine, let me specify that, they're not recommended for any type of booster at all. They can't receive a Pfizer booster. They can't receive a Moderna booster. So some tricky issues there. Moving on, going right to left, let's talk about that vial that has a blue cap and a purple vial label with a purple border. So that is this is the volume is 0.5 cc's. Note that this vaccine is recommended for 18 years and older as a booster at the 0.5 cc. But it's also a vaccine recommended for persons 6 years through 11 years of age. And now look to the right of this slide. And the tricky part here is that we want you to be able to use it as a booster dose for 6 years through 11 years of age, even though the label says, not a booster, sorry, a primary series dose for persons 6 years through 11 years of age, even though the label says booster dose only. So, and the reason for that is that vial to the left of the purple border, the blue cap and kind of a blue label there, it's teal actually, that one's not available yet. So the only vaccine you have is the purple for 6 years through 11 years primary series. So no teal, light blue vaccine available yet. Move over to the far left and you see a dark blue cap with magenta label. And this vaccine is to be used for persons 6 months through 5 years of age. It's a 0.25 cc. So really for Moderna, like with Pfizer, don't even think about trying to use these vaccines, you know, outside of what I've just recommended for age groups on this left-hand chart. But you'll have to take note of the fact that even, you know, some of the information on this left-hand chart, which I want you to follow, on the label itself, it may kind of suggest otherwise. It said, like, for instance, the blue cap, purple vial is marked as booster only, but no, you can use it as a primary series dose for 6 to 11. And so now I've got a big portion of this slide blocked out because I've covered it all already. So now let's move on to talk about Janssen. On the right-hand side, the primary dose of Janssen is 0.5 cc's. Now, when we're talking about giving additional doses, and I'll explain what an additional dose is on the next few slides, but note that your volume of your additional dose for Pfizer is going to match the age group. It's either 0.3 cc's or 0.2 cc's. Your additional dose for Moderna will kind of have some variation. It would be a 0.25 cc blue cap with the magenta label, or you could use a 0.5 cc blue cap with the purple label or the red cap. It really depends on the age of the patient. And for booster doses, again, it's going to be for Pfizer, age-based, 0.3 versus 0.2. For Moderna, it's age-based, and you have to be careful about your volumes. Again, when you're talking about Moderna and boosters, it's 0.25 of the red based on age, or 0.5 cc's of the blue cap, also age-based. So that's kind of the additional dose booster volume content. But what is an additional dose and a booster? So an additional dose is a dose that's given when the immune response is felt to be insufficient. And for additional doses, you can give an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, not a Janssen product. it's really recommended at a 28-day interval after the primary series, after completion of the primary series, at least 28 days, but it can be more than that. But we want you to try to do it at 28 days. Compression is good when you're talking about immunosuppressed persons. So for children 6 months through 4 years of age that have a 3-dose primary series defined, we don't recommend an additional dose to add on to that. That's the only group for whom you're not really doing a +1, is that Pfizer recipients 6 months through 4 years of age. It's their, even if they're immunosuppressed, their primary series is 3. But for Moderna, those that receive 2 doses of a primary series for Moderna and they're immunosuppressed, it is a 28-day interval to that additional dose. So that's the additional dose. The booster dose is defined differently. It's a dose of vaccine that should be administered when the initial sufficient immune response to a primary vaccine is likely to have waned over time. And so that's what a booster means. Now, when we talk, I want to kind of recap this approved versus authorized issue, because a lot of the complicated scheduling and regulatory requirements you're faced with are because of this. The only licensure is primary series of Comirnaty and Spikevax. For Comirnaty, it's 16 years of age, and for an older, and for Spikevax, it's 18 years of age and older. But for all other uses of these vaccines, whether it's authorization of Pfizer for persons 6 months through 15 years of age, or Moderna for persons 6 months through 17 years of age, any Janssen usage, 18 years and older, any additional doses that I just talked about, authorized, booster doses, authorized only, any first booster doses of Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen, only authorized. And I'll make a note that second booster doses, Janssen's not even authorized, just Pfizer and Moderna for second booster doses. And another definition, fully vaccinated versus up to date. So fully vaccinated is in effect 2 weeks after completion of your primary dose or series. Up to date means when someone has received the last booster dose for which they're eligible, whether that's, 1 booster dose, 2 booster doses, or even 0 booster doses. Some people don't have eligibility, so they are up to date when they're finished their primary, 2 weeks after their primary series, essentially. And so now I'm going to talk a bit about timing and spacing of this vaccine and some important considerations with the different vaccines. And to discuss this, I need to bring in the concept of the emergency use indication. This is a tool. So this is a guidance that's attached to vaccines that have a license. So EUIs really only apply to Pfizer and Moderna usage. And the EUI usage is also limited to 12 years of age and older. And so it's kind of tied in with licensure and also the provider agreement. And I'm sure the PrEP Act has some influence there as well for why we can't use EUIs for younger than 12. But EUIs are really actually important mostly for older persons anyway. They're really important for those persons who kind of have recurring immunocompromise. So let's say they received a booster dose. Maybe they were immunocompetent when they received a booster dose, but they were immunocompromised when they received their primary series. They need the additional dose. They already got the booster dose. So how do we swing that? That's where the EUI comes in. And again, it really, for the most part, will play a role in 18 and older. I mean, there are some booster doses for some vaccines recommended for persons 12 years old and older, i.e. the Pfizer gray cap. So that's kind of where you need to apply EUI to those persons who may have already received a booster. But for like some of the examples on this slide, if someone, let's say someone received a Moderna vaccine, the third bullet on this slide, let's say if they received the Moderna vaccine for that booster and they received the wrong volume, then they can receive a high volume for the additional dose that's allowed by the EUI. In a sense, they may have received 2 full doses of Pfizer and 2 full doses of Moderna because they messed up on that booster. They got the full instead of the, and we'll allow them a full dose for their because they were immunocompromised at the time of the primary series. They can get a full dose for that booster as well. And now I'm just going to kind of add an additional bullet to the bottom of all of this. EUIs do come in handy for you can't use the EUI for Janssen vaccine, but they come in handy for those that have received a primary dose while they were immunocompromised. So this is 18 years and older as well, right? If we're talking about Janssen, if they received a Janssen booster and now they're immunocompromised again, yes, they can get an additional dose of mRNA vaccine. The EUI will allow this. If a patient starts out with a primary dose and then they get Moderna and Pfizer as the booster, again, it's mostly 18-year-olds and older. Again, that dose of that third dose of mRNA vaccine can be administered as an additional dose with a history of immunocompromised during the primary series. And again, you can switch out your volumes and do some volume switching where you might be using the wrong volume. The EUI does allow this. So when we talk about kind of booster doses and recommendations generally for booster doses, for our first booster dose recommendation, the booster is, first of all, I've got 6 months at the top, and it's there for a reason because I'm kind of talking about the EUI a little bit again, but booster doses really are recommended for 5 years and older. The booster is restricted to the Pfizer vaccine for persons 5 through 17 years. And as with all doses, the preference for the booster dose is an mRNA vaccine. For immunocompetent persons, the interval to that booster dose is 5 months. For immunocompromised persons, the interval to the booster dose is 3 months. And when Janssen has been used, the interval to the booster dose is 2 months. Again, I've got some EUI content here. So, persons who may be recommended for the booster dose, and they may start their primary series. I think that's why I have that at the top, 6 months and old, because it's really, immunocompromised during the primary series that's relevant. So the EUI kicks in, though, upon booster eligibility, and the EUI will allow that 4th dose as well for patients who received the primary series of mRNA vaccine. Maybe they got a booster dose when they were immunocompetent, and now, as long as they're now 12 years old and older, you can catch them up on that additional dose because they were immunocompromised at the time of their primary series. And this does apply for Janssen again. Now, these folks are 18 and older. If they received a Janssen primary and Janssen booster, you can give the additional dose of an mRNA vaccine to these patients as well. Now, for the second booster dose recommendation, the eligibility for this is all persons 50 years old and older, and persons 12 years old and older who are immunocompromised. So they get not only a first booster, but a second booster as well. Another eligibility criteria is persons who receive 2 doses of Janssen vaccine. That first Janssen dose is considered a booster dose. They can receive a second booster as well, and they may receive the second booster. It's a little softer on that. And then the interval from the first booster to the second booster is 4 months. And then, and the second booster also can be given to patients who received a primary Janssen that was followed with a Moderna booster and a Moderna additional. They can also receive a second booster dose. And again, if they're immunocompromised, it's a strong second booster dose recommendation, right? It's no may, it's should. And they can receive this second one. And we don't allow, the EUI doesn't allow this, but CDC's interim clinical considerations does allow this as well. I'm going to shift away from timing and spacing and move towards adverse reactions. What are some typical reactions to the COVID-19 vaccines? They include local reactions like pain or swelling at the injection site, swollen lymph nodes on the same side as the vaccinated arm, systemic reactions, fever, fatigue, muscle aches, headache, chills, frequent during the 7 days after vaccination. These are mild or moderate in severity. They occur within the 3 days of vaccination and resolve within 1 to 3 days of onset. And they are more frequently reported and severe in younger individuals. There are adverse reactions that are probably more prominently recognized by providers, or they're equally important, I would say, much rarer, extremely rare, in fact, but more severe. And these include conditions like thrombosis with Rhombocytopenia Syndrome, or TTS. This is characterized by symptoms including headache, new onset neurologic symptoms, shortness of breath, chest pain, abdominal pain, and a petechial purpuric rash. There is a higher risk in females younger than 50 years of age receiving the Janssen vaccine. Myopericarditis is typified by chest pain, shortness of breath, and palpitations. There's a higher risk in males younger than 50 years receiving the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna. Finally, Guillain-Barré syndrome, motor paralysis, decreased reflexes, and this risk primarily exists in older adults and is seen with the Janssen vaccine. I'm only going to discuss, in the interest of time, the red and the yellow on this slide. It highlights contraindications and precautions to COVID-19 vaccine. There are 3 contraindications, and 2 of the contraindications are based on allergy. So they include a history of a severe allergic reaction, for example, anaphylaxis, after a previous dose or to a component of the COVID-19 vaccine. The second contraindication is history of a known diagnosed allergy to a component of the COVID-19 vaccine, whether it's severe or not. The third contraindication is TTS following receipt of a previous Janssen COVID-19 vaccine or other COVID-19 vaccines which are not authorized in the United States that are based on adenovirus vectors, and an example is the AstraZeneca vaccine. This is a contraindication to the Janssen vaccine only. There are 7 precautions for COVID-19 vaccine. The first 3 are based on allergy, a history of an immediate allergic reaction to a vaccine other than COVID-19 vaccine or to any injectable therapy, whether it's an intramuscular, intravenous, subcutaneous therapy, is a precaution for COVID-19 vaccines. The second precaution is a history of a non-severe, immediate, with onset less than 4 hours, allergic reaction after a dose of COVID-19 vaccine. This type of history would be a precaution for the same type of vaccine only. So it would be neither a contraindication or precaution to another type of COVID-19 vaccine. So you have history that really kind of strong on time, but not severe. consider it a precaution for that similar type. If it happened with a mRNA vaccine, maybe you'd want to choose a Janssen vaccine instead. It's same type vaccine only. The third precaution is having an allergy-related contraindication, full-blown contraindication to one type of the COVID-19 vaccine. This is a precaution to all COVID-19 not all, but all of them for which it's not a contraindication. So it's a precaution to the other vaccine as well. So that's the allergy-based precautions for COVID. And then there are 4 precautions that are unrelated to allergy. The first is a history of myocarditis or pericarditis after a dose of mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. This is a precaution to mRNA vaccines only. Next, a moderate or severe acute illness with or without fever is a precaution for every vaccine, including COVID. Next, a history of MIS-C or MIS-A is a precaution for COVID-19 vaccines. And then Guillain-Barré syndrome history is a precaution to the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine only. Last COVID topic, and I'm not even going to go into the details on this. I'm just going to say Appendix C at the URL below discusses those circumstances where a vaccine error has occurred and you're left with the question, do I need to repeat the dose? I highly recommend going to the interim clinical considerations for more background on everything I've mentioned. But there is also this nifty Appendix C table to help you through those circumstances where a vaccine error has occurred and do you need to repeat the dose? In many circumstances where the error is based on storage and temperature, you need to talk to the manufacturer for COVID vaccines, talk to the manufacturer just to verify that in fact there is a temperature deviation, because the regulations are kind of tricky and we back the manufacturers on that for COVID. So anyway, so that's what you should do in that circumstance. But for the decision about whether to repeat, the manufacturers are almost never going to give you any guidance. So go to this table. All right, let's move on to non-COVID vaccination issues, and beginning with the schedule. Here's the child adolescent immunization schedule. I'll mention that it reflects not only ACIP, but also American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Family Physicians, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the American College of Nurse Midwives. They all weigh in on this schedule. There are 14 routinely recommended vaccines and 2 high-risk vaccines. They're listed in the left-hand column, and the horizontal header lists age groups. Note dengue at the bottom is a new vaccine addition. I'll talk more about that later. It's recommended only in dengue endemic areas. It's a heavy geographic restrictions on this one. Colored bars on the schedule describe the recommended ages for administering doses of these vaccines. The color yellow is a recommendation for all persons in the age group without contraindications or precautions. The green bar is an age range for catch-up for a given vaccine. The purple bar means the vaccine is not routinely recommended for that age, but may be recommended on the basis of selected risk factors. Color blue indicates that a vaccine is recommended for that age group on the basis of shared clinical decision-making, involves a decision that requires both provider and patient input generally. And in many venues, we want blue to involve a discussion between the provider and the patient. The evidence for yellow is always strongly based on evidence to recommendations framework. When there's blue, it means we just don't have that for the population as a whole, but we really want to make sure this vaccine is available for the individual, and it will be covered for the individual by VFC or ACA, which is important to realize that blue is the same as yellow in that circumstance. It just means that, your default is not to give the vaccine, but you can definitely offer it if the patient wants it. Gray means there's not a CDC recommended for a given vaccine in that age group. That yellow stippling you see for 9 to 10-year-olds under HPV vaccine means that you can offer the vaccine for HPV vaccine for persons 9 or 10 years of age, even if they don't meet the high risk factors that are embodied in that little purple square that's above the stippled yellow. So we want providers to have maximum flexibility to offer that, even if the patient doesn't possess that risk factor, which happens to be a history of abuse. Then that's why the history of the purple, but with stippled yellow, you can offer this vaccine and you should have that flexibility for 9 and 10-year-olds. And of course, the recommendation is full recommendation 11 to 12 for HPV vaccine. The adult schedule looks like this. Color coding carries the exact same meaning. There are 8 routinely recommended vaccines. Hep B, of course, so many folks were vaccinated in infancy, but as I'll talk about today, not everyone. So that's a new rec that we are going to have a full vaccination rec for Hep B through 59 years of age. The adult schedule, it's harmonized with American Academy of Family Physicians, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the American College of Nurse Midwives, the American College of Physicians. So now let's go through some of these vaccine recs. Dengue vaccine recommendations published December of 2021. There are 4 viruses in the flavivirus family, Flaviviridae family, Den 1, 2, 3, and 4. The viruses are carried by 2 mosquitoes, 2 species, Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus mosquitoes. There are 4 billion people in the world that live in endemic areas, but for the U.S., I'm going to be talking about, the 2 territories, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and the 4 freely associated states, the Protectorate American Samoa, and the 3 awardees, Marshall Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, and Palau. These are the areas for which you use dengue vaccine, and only for residents, not travelers too, but residents of these areas. The symptoms, well, first more on the burden. So worldwide, 400 million infections, 40,000 deaths. And when you talk about symptoms of disease, most cases are mild to moderate, fever, myalgia, nausea, vomiting, and rash. However, in some cases of dengue, and notably, not all, but notably, this can happen when it's a second infection in life. What happens is, not really progression from fever, myalgia, nausea, vomiting to severe dengue, but like full-blown severe dengue. Internal bleeding, shock, it's quite serious, and the take home here is that this can occur with second exposure to the virus. And this is relevant because you can be infected with more than one type of dengue in a lifetime. So I'll get to that in a moment. A bit about the vaccine. So dengue vaccine is called CYD-TDV. The CYD stands for Chimera of Yellow Fever and Dengue, although this vaccine is not for the prevention of yellow fever. It's just built that way. It's a hybrid. It's manufactured by Sanofi Pasteur under the trade name Dengvaxia. This is a live reassortant lyophilized injectable vaccine. It's because it's live, it's administered subcutaneously like other live injectable vaccines. It's recommended for persons 9 through 16 years of age, only living in endemic areas. It is a 3-dose series administered at 0, 6 months, and 12 months. There is a 5-month interval, a minimum interval of 5 months. Most importantly, patients should receive this vaccine only if they have been previously infected with dengue once before. The reason for this is that As you know, vaccines mimic natural infection, and this is great for every vaccine, but there's some caveats with dengue. So look at the top row. This is an image of someone who has never been vaccinated, and when they are infected the first time upon exposure to a mosquito, they'll have their nausea, vomiting, mild symptoms of dengue. That's the yellow. On a second exposure, they may, not always, but that's where we see high risk for the hemorrhagic fever and shock. Internal bleeding, which leads to shock. And so, and subsequent exposures, if you survive that and you're exposed again, subsequent exposures happen to be mild. So now move down to the second row. What if someone is vaccinated, but they've never been infected before? Then they're vaccinated, and the vaccine will prevent the mild illness predominantly. I'm not going to say there's no effectiveness against severe disease, but what can happen is a second exposure could still occur. And when second exposures occur, and this was seen in some of the trials with this vaccine in the Philippines, patients that received the vaccine and then were exposed had hemorrhagic disease. And, this, might not have happened if they hadn't received the vaccine at all. It still might have happened, but it might not have. So this is a problem. And so what we recommend is that you only vaccinate persons, like in the bottom row, with someone that's had a previous infection. So now they're in that yellow state of having had an infection. And when they're vaccinated, we do see effectiveness against disease. And, we don't see the severe disease as much anymore. So I would say it's effective against both severe and mild illness. And then subsequent illnesses after that also are subsequent exposures lead to mild illness. And so the bottom row is what we want. And so what we want is only vaccinate persons who already have a history of previous infection. This is really different from every other, disease for which we vaccinate. And there's a lot of programmatic effort right now going on in the freely associated states and the U.S. territories to bring this about efficiently. We can't afford to vaccinate susceptible people. So to document, what do you need? You need a laboratory result. It could be a PCR test, or it could be an antigen test, like one that tests for the NS1 non-structural antigen, or it can be a positive serology on both of these two antibody tests at the bottom, the Euroimmune and the CTK Biotech. And this is also interesting. We now have serology as an option. This is so different from every other vaccine preventable disease for which we provide recommendations. In this case, it's someone that's serology negative. In most circumstances, unless you have one of these other tests that document positivity, serology negative, you don't want to give this vaccine. And many places probably are going to choose serology for cost reasons. And so a negative serology, do not vaccinate. Positive serology, yes, you do vaccinate. So the polar opposite of what we say for pretty much of every other vaccine. And of course, there are little exceptions with those other vaccines, but this is a kind of a flipped logic. That's what it is. And I hope you picked up on the reasons why and how important it is. Okay, moving on to zoster, recombinant zoster vaccine, RZV. Not a new vaccine, but new Rex, right? For quite a long time, we've had, I think it was 2018, we've had recommendations for this recombinant vaccine for everyone 50 years of age and older. Well, on January 21st, this was published of this year, expanded use of RZV. Now, this vaccine is recommended for all persons 19 years of age and older with altered immunocompetence, immunosuppressed. These folks are at higher risk of severe disease from zoster, and the safety of the vaccine is similar to that in immunocompetent persons. So the vaccine's effective in persons with altered immunocompetence. Well, actually, let me talk about the safety first. You can see the rate of serious adverse events, 0 to 1.6. Rates of grade 3 adverse reactions, 9 to 22.3. Events and reactions are kind of measured at different times. Serious kind of reflects hospitalization, disability. It's a VAERS metric. Grade 3 represents like whopping severity, can't get out of bed. That's high, isn't it? 10 to 22.3. But here's the take-home message. It's the same for immunocompetent persons. That's what we know about this vaccine. It packs a punch. And folks get better after a day. I've had this vaccine and I could not get out of bed that day. And I'm immunocompetent. And so this vaccine packs a punch. And actually, so that's not as shocking, this range of 10 to 22% grade 3 reactions in the immunosuppressed. And they're high risk of disease, so they need this protection. There's also no increase in certain types of adverse reactions like graft versus host disease. We see that in patients that have bone marrow transplants or HCT recipients, same thing. A stem cell transplant, we worry about graft versus host disease. We don't see it in recipients of Shingrix. And the effectiveness is good, not as good as in the immunocompetent. For zoster efficacy, it's 68 to 87% effective. And for post-herpetic neuralgia, 88 to 89% effective. So good vaccine, works well, but wow, packs a punch. And so it's recommended for 19 years and older. We ideally want this vaccine given to patients that are expecting to be immunocompromised. That's the best case scenario, to give it ahead of time because the effectiveness is weakened once someone's already immunocompromised. So try to give it before. It's a non-live vaccine, so it can be given during breastfeeding. It's not a concern during pregnancy. It's not a contraindication. It's non-live, but there's no data. There's not as much data on that in pregnant persons, so it is recommended to delay the vaccine in someone that is currently pregnant. This vaccine is not recommended for immunocompromised persons who don't have a history of varicella zoster or varicella vaccination. And this is tricky. Laboratory tests are not cost effective, so you're going to get a false negative. So we don't want you using tests to verify immunocompromise or previous immunity as well. So what can you do? Well, you can do a number of things. If you don't have a history of this, of varicella disease, zoster disease, or varicella vaccination, well, hopefully the patient's immunocompetent when you're deciding to use this vaccine anyway, and so then give varicella vaccine first. But if the patient's already immunocompromised and you don't have this history, it's going to be kind of challenging. You're going to have to kind of wait until they're immunocompetent if they're immunocompromised because of their medications, and then give them their varicella vaccine. Or if your window is too narrow, then give them the Shingrix vaccine first if they're immunocompetent. So you can give varicella vaccine after Shingrix vaccine. Moving on to Pneumococcal Rex, published in January this year as well. So we have 2 new conjugate vaccines licensed by the FDA. The top 2 are our old ones. The pure polysaccharide vaccine licensed in 1983, used generally for persons that have immunosuppression or other high-risk conditions. The 13-valent pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, universal recommendations for children, licensed in 2010. It's conjugate. It has smaller valency. It has capsule from 13 serotypes of Streptococcus pneumoniae, but it is a conjugate vaccine, so it has a stronger and longer immune response. It was licensed to replace PCV7. That became unavailable by 2014, and we only had PCV13 at that point, and is the recommended vaccine, as you know, for children, has been. In June of 2021, PCV20 vaccine was licensed. And then a month later in July 2021, the 15 vaccine was licensed. The 20-valent vaccine is approved for use in adults only. And here is a chart that shows you the specific strains that are covered by the vaccine. These capsular serotypes are the ones specifically in the vaccines. This chart, you can look at it later. I don't need to really go into detail. It plays a role in why we recommend which vaccines when we recommend them. So now I've already talked about the routine uses of 13 and 23 generally. Now let's talk about 15 and 20. So both vaccines are now recommended for adults. It is recommended for, so PCV15 is recommended in combination with PPSV23 for high-risk adults 19 through 64 years of age, or all adults 65 years of age and older. And all of these age groups for persons who are PCV13 naive or have an unknown pneumococcal vaccination history. And the interval between PCV15 and PPSV23 is 1 year routinely. For PCV20, it's again the same groups essentially, high-risk adults 19 through 64 years of age, or all adults 65 years of age and older, or PCV13 naive or unknown pneumococcal vaccination history. We don't state a preference for 20 versus the combo 15 and 23 for these adults. Here is a list. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read through it, but for the decision about whether your adult qualifies as high risk, this is not really tiered anymore. It's any one of these conditions is considered high risk for use of this recommendation, 19 through 64 years of age. And then again, you should be naive, meaning naive to PCV13 or an unknown pneumococcal vaccination history. And then after that, you do not require any more doses of either vaccines on this slide. No more PCV15, no more PPSV23, no more PCV20. The routine interval I mentioned is 1 year for PCV15 and 23. For certain patients, you can consider an 8-week interval instead of 1 year. It's a softer recommendation. Consider you may, and these are the conditions, the functional anatomic asplenia, immunosuppression, chronic renal disease, CSF leak, and cochlear implant. What about adults that have never received PPSV 23, but they've already received PCV 13? We get questions about this a lot. Can we switch over to the new rack? CDC generally says you shouldn't. Continue with PPSV 23, and that might mean your additional dose after the 65th birthday as well. Or an earlier dose if immunocompromised at a 5-year interval, and then maybe another dose after the 65th birthday. So, however, if your office does not have PPSV 23, you can give PCV 20 as a substitute for PCV 23, and then you're done. No more any conjugate, no more pneumococcal vaccine. And note that if you just do decide to stick with PPSV 23, you're high risk. It's not a soft, it's a hard recommendation. Make sure there's 8 weeks minimum. Try to get that second dose of the higher valency in for your highest risk groups. Otherwise, it's a 1 year interval as well. And Medicare tends to cover that 1 year interval. Persons who have already received PPSV 23 but have not received PCV 13, what should they do? There may be a bunch of adults in this category. They may receive either PCV 15 or PCV 20. So you may give this one if they've already received PPSV 23. What if you don't have PCV 15 or PCV 20 yet? Should you send them out and wait or have them go looking? It's your choice. We tend to say don't miss an opportunity to vaccinate. So if you do still have PCV 13, you can use it. There is an app to help with recommendations at the website at the bottom of this slide. I'm going to move really fast and just talk about hepatitis B vaccine. This is a woman who was infected in childhood, actually, didn't get her childhood vaccine, and then developed chronic liver disease, liver cancer, and with ascites. Later in life, she died. We don't see this in the US because we have such good penetration of childhood vaccination. We hope we don't see this too much anymore. We do still have persons coming to the United States as children. They, of course, are recommended to receive the infant series once they're here. How about as adults, if immigrants come, or if there are people that were born here that just missed out on their child series, we need to get these folks protected and vaccinated. And actually, on the burden in the U.S., skip to the bottom circle on the left. This is the number of U.S. chronic infections we still see: 850,000 to 2.2 million. There's with a median of 1.9 million. And we see chronic infections still. This is what leads to the complications. We want to eradicate and eventually eliminate, the other way around. We want to eliminate hepatitis B in the United States and eventually, hopefully, eradicate. So what we've done is we have new recommendations to recommend the vaccine universally now through 59 years of age. If someone is 60 years and older and they don't have a high-risk condition, you can still vaccinate them. And if they do have a high-risk condition, it's a full recommendation to receive the vaccine. So that's our recommendation for Hep B. And then the last vaccine I want to talk about is Vaxelus. It's a combination vaccine that contains DTaP, IPV, Hib, Hep B vaccine. It has an OMP conjugate, but that's a little misleading. This is not like PEDVAX Hib. It is 3 full doses in infancy. It is not recommended after 12 months of age, after the first birthday, and it is not for use primarily. It's not a preferential use for American Indians, Alaska Natives. So it has an OMP conjugate, but in many ways it functions kind of like the ACT-HIB product. It contains prevention of 6 diseases. This is great. I want to I know time is really short, and I do want to, before I get to my last slide, just kind of mention some other votes that happened. I can't put this content on a slide, but I can talk about it. The CDC voted to preferentially recommend a higher dose or adjuvanted influenza vaccine for persons 65 years old and older. That includes either the recombinant vaccine, the high-dose vaccine, or the adjuvanted influenza vaccine. If none of the vaccines are available, don't miss an opportunity to vaccinate and use another age-appropriate influenza vaccine. So there was an ACIP vote for that. There was an ACIP vote for Priorix, which is a new MMR vaccine that can be used for all the same situations for MMR2, either recommended or off-label. I think that's it. I've talked about COVID today. So with that, I really want to thank everyone. You guys are on the front lines vaccinating with COVID-19 vaccines and routine vaccines. I know how stressful it is, and I want to leave some time for questions to help with folks if they have any. So if there's any time, I'd like to take some questions, but thank you for being out there and vaccinating.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Kroger, for all of that amazing information. I don't know how you packed that all together. So thank you so much. And for anybody, if you're asking, will I have access to the slides? I have been informed that it will be available about a week after today's presentation to definitely go back and reference. So just so you know, you can rest easy. But there is a question in the chat. The question is, will ACIP be considering a change to the HPV recommendation, making the routine vaccine recommendation for the first dose given at age 9 instead of 11 to 12?
I have not heard of it being, I'm not 100% certain. I am aware that a lot of groups want this. Truly, it kind of already exists. I showed you the yellow stippling. It means providers can give this dose of vaccine. So in fact, we already kind of have done this on our schedule. But I'm aware that there are those that want more heavy promotion of this. And I don't, and that probably, well, I can see circumstances where that might require an ACIP vote or even discussion. I'm not sure actually if it would require that, but I am aware of discussions on this. You know, our data are based on kind of, or our recommendations, I should say, are based on the data that we have. We used to have a vaccine platform of 11 to 12 where we would recommend the vaccine at that point. But, we also have recommendations that kind of state that, if the first dose is given between 9 through 14 years of age, it's a 2-dose series instead of a 3-dose series. So there are many places where we kind of, 9 through 10 is fine with me. It's yellow stippled, so you can do it. You can vaccinate at 9 or 10 years of age. It's licensed down to 9 years of age. So yes, but I don't know for sure if there's going to be a vote or a posting or a recommendation for that. I've heard it talked about, and I know that there are groups that post things that are slightly different than what CDC posts.
Great, thank you for answering that. And then there was another question in the chat, but you definitely already went over that very well, just in regards to the dengue vaccine. So thank you for clarifying that in the presentation as well. Are there any other questions while we have Dr. Kroger? Wonderful. Well, again, thank you, sir, for your time. And again, for making time to speak with us today and really give us a really great overview. So we definitely appreciate all of your insight, all of your wisdom, all of your knowledge. So thank you again. So at this time, it is 10:46, so we are right on time. We want to give you your much promised break to stretch your legs, grab some water, coffee, whatever you would like. But the most important thing is we want you to come back because we still have 2 great presenters that are next on board for the webinar. So again, at this time, please feel free to take your break, but we will start back at 11 sharp for our next topic, which is on building vaccine confidence, which is going to be a very great topic for us to cover as we are talking to our patients. So again, please take this time to take your break. Wonderful. So we are all back. I hope everyone had a quick but great 15-minute break. We're very excited to be able to jump back into the webinar and hear from our next speaker, Ms. Robyn Correll. So just want to give a little bit of information on her before she goes into her presentation. So as the Impact and Evaluation Director for Vaccinate Your Family, Ms. Robyn is responsible for designing and implementing evaluation strategies. Her work leverages data to measure the progress of Vaccinate Your Family's various programmatic initiatives and to help the organization strengthen and communicate its impact. Ms. Correll has over a decade of experience as a public health professional working at the intersection of data and communication, and she is also a certified community health worker instructor. So we know we are in great hands this morning once again, and we're very excited to hear about this topic in regards to building vaccine confidence. So without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Robyn.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. I am very excited to be with you all today. As Dr. Walker mentioned, my name is Robyn Correll, and I'm with Vaccinate Your Family, which many of you all might be very familiar with as we're headquartered in DC. And today we're going to be talking all about vaccine confidence. Give my computer a little time, it needs its coffee. All right, so before we dive in, I just wanted to give a brief heads up about what we'll be talking about today. We're going to be talking a little bit about what goes into vaccine confidence and vaccine hesitancy, as well as what we know from the research and from real life experience about what actually works to increase vaccine confidence and increase immunization rates, both in communities as well as clinical settings. And before we dive in, I do want to give just a little shout out. Much of this presentation has been adapted from a longer continuing education series that Vaccinate Your Family collaborated on with Dia de Mujer Latina, which is a community health worker organization based in Texas, although they also work nationally. And so this session actually comes from, or part of the session was adapted from one of those trainings. It's a 4-part series that covers everything community health workers need to know to be able to increase vaccine confidence, talk about vaccines with people in their community, and help people navigate barriers so they can have better access to vaccination throughout the lifespan, not just for the COVID vaccine, but for all vaccines. And so we piloted this training in Texas with about 200 community health workers. We piloted in English and in Spanish, and hopefully it will be available very soon for everybody else across the country if you're interested. It covers everything from the history of vaccines and vaccine science to how to talk about vaccines, which we'll touch on today, as well as barriers to vaccination and the social determinants of health that contribute to people being unable or unwilling to be vaccinated. So vaccine confidence is a spectrum. I know for some, it might feel more like a light switch, something somebody has or they don't have, but in reality, it is a continuum. And where people fall on this continuum can change from one day to the next. It can change over time. I will share that I haven't always been on this left side of the spectrum where it's bright green and people are very eager to get vaccinated. They trust vaccines. They trust the people who recommend and administer them. I wasn't always there. I was further here in the middle. And I'll share an example of how I inched my way up the continuum. So about 12 years ago, I was in a clinic for my annual checkup, and the nurse practitioner came in, she sat down and she said, "All right, Robyn, everything looks great. You're in great health. Everything looks good. But I noticed you haven't gotten your HPV vaccine. And I think it's really important that you get that today." And at the time I said, I don't know, I hadn't been working in vaccines. I had only recently started working in public health. And so I wasn't sure. And I said, I don't know about that. I don't think I need it. And she very patiently sat down in the chair next to me, set my folder aside, my chart aside, and said, "Let's talk about what's bothering you. Let's talk about what questions you have." And she very patiently, very lovingly, and very calmly told me I was wrong over and over again. And I say that jokingly, but the reasons that I had at the time were based on misinformation or a misunderstanding. And so I had mentioned, it's a very new vaccine. And she had said, it's actually not, it's actually based on technology that we've had since the 80s. And she explained to me the science of how that vaccine was made and how it was tested. And I had said, well, I'm engaged. Thank you very much. I don't need that vaccine. And she, again, very calmly and very kindly said, but it's not about today. It's not about your risk today. It's about your risk for the future and your health for the future. And so it didn't take long, I think probably about 5 or 6 minutes, to be honest, but she, as I said, very calmly answered my questions. And by the end of that conversation, I was far enough along the confidence spectrum that I said, okay, which arm? I was out of reason. She had answered all of my questions and had addressed all of my concerns. And so I know that, as I mentioned, a lot of people might think of it as a light switch, but it's not. It's movable, it's fluid. There might be some people all the way here on the right who refuse all vaccines, and no matter what they hear, they're very dug in the trenches and they say, no, I'm never going to get a vaccine. I don't trust them. And then there are people over here who, all vaccines are great, here for it. Please sign me up, first in line. But there are a lot of people in the middle. And it's not necessarily that they're against vaccines or they're anti-vaccine. It's just that they might have some questions that haven't been answered yet, or they might have some concerns that they just haven't found a satisfying explanation about yet. And so what we really are going to be talking about today is this movable middle. This section in the middle of folks who have questions, they might have concerns, they might be open to vaccines, but they just haven't gotten up or haven't gotten the information, the context, or the resources that they need to get further along this spectrum to be able to actually get vaccinated. And how people arrive on this continuum, how they move up and down, it can be very, as I said, fluid, because we bring our whole selves to the vaccine decision. We bring all of our thoughts and feelings, whether it's a thought about, what you think about pandemic response and how the government has handled pandemic response, or how you feel about COVID in general. It could be about your attitudes or cognitive biases. There are things that our brain does, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but there are things that our brain does to take shortcuts, and that can actually lead us to underestimate the risk or to misunderstand what the true risks and benefits might be. So one example is this idea that people are actually more worried about doing something that results in harm than they are about not doing something, even if it results in harm. So not vaccinating can feel safer, even if it does put them at greater risk because of those cognitive biases. It can also have to do with social norms and beliefs, what our friends and family are doing, what we see. If all we see or hear about when it comes to vaccines is side effects or safety issues, or people who heard about somebody who had this issue, if all we hear are those negative things, that can really chip away at our confidence and have us go down further in this spectrum, right? Our own experiences. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who experience racism in healthcare settings, or who feel like they have been looked down upon or dismissed in settings where people get vaccines. And that can really cross over to how they feel about all medical products or all pharmaceutical products, including vaccines. And so acknowledging that people, again, bring their whole selves to this, right? It's not just necessarily what they think today, but what has happened to them in the past. If I mentioned Dia La Mujer Latina, which is a very great partner. And there are promotores and community health workers in that organization whose family members were part of the forced sterilization of Latino women. And growing up with those stories of hearing about that awful mistreatment, that awful atrocity that happened to them, that affected their ability and their willingness to trust healthcare providers and public health professionals. So when they hear about vaccine recommendations, they might automatically go to a place of suspicion, right? Where they don't know if they can trust it because of these things that have happened in the past, because of this inherited trauma that they experience. And then also thinking about moral values and identity, what we view as our obligation to ourselves, to our families, to our community, right? Who we think we are responsible to and for. all of those things can go into how much you trust a vaccine, what you think about the benefits versus risks, and who you listen to about vaccine information. And misinformation is a part of that. There are lots of reasons why somebody might be where they are in the vaccine confidence spectrum that has absolutely nothing to do with misinformation. It could potentially be because they don't feel like they have access to vaccines, or if they do get vaccinated, they don't feel confident that they are going to be able to take time off work to recover from side effects. So it might not be about misinformation, but for many people, misinformation can influence where they are on that vaccine confidence spectrum. And there are a lot of reasons why misinformation can be very sticky. It's very, very hard to dislodge. Once somebody believes a piece of misinformation, it can be hard to convince them to believe something different. And there are many reasons for that. I'm only going to cover a few here. But one reason that people believe misinformation is because they've seen it over and over and over again. There is this phenomenon in psychology where the more you see or hear something, the more likely you are to believe that it's true. So even if you don't believe it the first time, if you continue to see it on social media, or if you hear about it from friends and family over and over and over again, that starts to chip away, and over time, you might end up actually believing it. Another reason why some folks might believe misinformation is because they don't really pause to think about it. If you think about where misinformation spreads, often we see misinformation on social media, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But misinformation can go very, very quickly on social media. If you think about how you might scroll your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed or Instagram, your thumb, you drag up and you go very quickly. So even if you don't stop to really read the full article or read the full post or headline, you might see it, it kind of burrows itself into your brain, and then you move on without really thinking about it critically. And again, the more we see things over and over again, the more likely we are to believe it. So giving people an opportunity to really pause and reflect, and we'll talk about how we can do that online in a minute, but how encouraging people to really think about what they're seeing critically can build their capacity to reject misinformation when they see it come across their feed. Another reason why folks might believe in misinformation is because it's really designed to make people feel very strongly. When we feel really strong emotions like anger or fear or disgust, that can kind of override our critical thinking, right? So when we are scrolling again, or we hear a story that's meant to make us afraid or meant to make us angry, we might be more likely to go ahead and pass that story on via sharing it or what have you. Because again, we're not necessarily thinking critically. And then the last portion is because perhaps it might have come from a trusted source. So somebody that we trust, whether it be because we know them personally or because we identify with them, or they share an identity with us. So unfortunately, there are folks who are trusted members of community who spread misinformation. And so then that can be particularly dangerous because again, once misinformation is believed, it can be very, very hard to dislodge. So over the course of this presentation, we're going to be talking about some different strategies that we can use to help bolster vaccine confidence. And part of that is helping to address misinformation as it spreads, because we've unfortunately learned that misinformation can get overwhelming, and it can really chip away at confidence. So we can't just ignore it. We do need to address it. And we can do that one-on-one as well as online. And so I'll share some strategies there. But I think if you walk away with anything today, my hope is that you walk away with this. Empathy and trust are absolutely critical to vaccine conversations. It's absolutely critical to building vaccine confidence. If people don't trust us when we talk about vaccines, it's not going to make a difference, right? We need their trust. And part of that might be that we need to repair some broken trust or some trust that has been broken, or bonds that have been broken. Build trust in places where we haven't really invested maybe the time, resources, and energy to do that, or partner with really trusted messengers and trusted partners to be able to have those conversations in a community, so that those conversations come from that trusted individual. But we also need to be empathetic. as I mentioned, people bring their whole selves to the vaccine conversation. And many of the reasons why some folks might feel hesitant about getting vaccinated are completely valid and understandable reasons. They might just not have had access to that information to be able to answer those questions, or they might have been misled by people that they trust, or they might have been hearing stories throughout their life about people who now recommend and administer vaccines doing things that hurt people they care about. So we really need to be empathetic and understand that people are just trying to do their best, right? They're just trying to make the best decision for themselves, for their families. And so meeting them where they are on that continuum and being very careful not to judge where they are on that continuum, on that vaccine confidence spectrum. If they're all the way on the right, understanding that there are things that happened that led them to be on that space all the way on the right. If they're in the middle, understanding that they probably have questions or concerns, and our job is not to judge where they are, but to help them access that information or help to give them the context or resources that they need. So what are some evidence-based tips for talking about vaccines? Again, listening with empathy. Listening is incredibly important. We don't want to assume we know why somebody doesn't want to get vaccinated. We don't want to assume we know why somebody is just rejecting vaccines, right? So asking open-ended questions. Where did you hear that? Would you tell me more? Figuring out what it is that is at the root of their concerns, or what information do they still need to be able to make a truly informed choice. Another thing that we can do is ask permission before we share information. I'm based in Texas, and I can tell you, Texans, we do not like being told what to do, right? We like our autonomy. We like having the confidence to be able to make our own decisions. But when somebody comes and says, well, this is what you absolutely should do, and especially with an air of judgment, that can be a huge turnoff, and it can help erode that trust that we might have with that person. So by asking permission before we share information, it acknowledges to them that that we respect their autonomy, that we respect that this is their decision to make. We can't make this vaccine decision for them, but we can help figure out and help them find what they need to be able to make a truly informed choice. Another thing that we can do is to help them find their reason for vaccinating, find their own reason to get vaccinated. All of us working in public health, we know that vaccine decisions are all about benefits versus risks, right? And so sometimes we might say, this is the benefit of vaccinating, but that might not really be that might not be enough of a reason for somebody to get vaccinated. So helping to share your own can be a way to help people get thinking about that. If you're comfortable sharing your own reasons for getting vaccinated, that storytelling can be a really powerful tool in vaccine conversations. So when I was getting vaccinated for COVID last fall, last year in last spring, my reason wasn't just because the vaccine worked, and wasn't just because I wanted to protect myself from COVID. My reason was because I hadn't seen my grandmother in a year and a half at that point, and she had leukemia and she had dementia, and I was just so excited to be able to get vaccinated so I could go and I could visit her and I could hug her. And I was so excited to be able to do that. Getting vaccinated helped me do that. Because she had leukemia, she was at higher risk, of course, of getting COVID. And she was living in an assisted living facility. So there were a lot of risks that came with visiting her during the pandemic, but getting vaccinated helped me significantly lower those risks down. And so I was able to go and see her. And that feeling of getting to hug somebody that you love, that you want to protect, that was my reason for getting vaccinated. And so sharing that story with others, that helped get them starting to think about, well, hey, who are the people in my life that I really miss and that I really want to protect? Or the kids that they have at their home that were too young to be vaccinated for a very, very long time. Or thinking about, if even things like if you get vaccinated, you're less likely to land in the hospital, and that can get really, really expensive. Thinking about what those individuals have, what needs they have in their life, what values they have in their life. And you can only really figure that out by asking those questions, by building those relationships, and by having that empathy. But if you don't necessarily know what that reason is, sharing your own can be helpful for them. Another tip for talking about vaccines is to help navigate folks to vaccine services, especially last year when we were still developing these processes and we're still trying to figure out, how to distribute the vaccines and how to get people to vaccination sites. There was a lot of confusion and people didn't always know how to do it. Or they weren't necessarily sure that they were eligible. So we work, as I mentioned, we work with the Latino and community health workers and promotores. There were a lot of folks who thought that if you didn't have, your immigration status affected your ability to get vaccinated against COVID, which which isn't true. You can get vaccinated against COVID regardless of your immigration or residency status, but a lot of folks didn't know that. And so helping to navigate them to vaccine services, helping them to understand where they could go and who was eligible was a really big part of those conversations, especially last year. And I want to flag too, one thing as we're talking about immigration status, another huge barrier to access that isn't always easy to address, but is super important, is language barriers. There are folks who speak perhaps an indigenous language from Latin America that isn't very commonly spoken here, especially in healthcare settings. So making sure people understand that there are access, that they should have access to interpretation lines, or providing information in the language that they speak can be really, really beneficial, because again, everybody can, it's totally natural to have questions. And so making sure that the individuals who don't necessarily speak English or Spanish or any of the dominant languages in the United States still have access to that information is really important. And then once again, partnering with trusted messengers. I think very, very often the messenger is more important than the message. We can talk until we're blue about the benefits of vaccines, but again, if people don't trust us, it's not going to land, right? So partnering with those trusted messengers in the community or in your healthcare site can be really, really important. We partnered with Latina to train community health workers because we knew that they were particularly well positioned to help with vaccine confidence and to help with vaccine access. Community health workers, they very often come from the very communities that they serve. They speak the language, literally, and are able to translate information in a way that resonates both culturally and linguistically. And so we knew that that community health workers were very trusted messengers in their community. So helping to give those messengers the information and tools that they needed to be able to navigate these conversations, we knew would result in more people being able to get vaccinated and increase vaccine confidence in those settings. So there are a lot of great tools and frameworks that people can use to be able to navigate vaccine conversations. If you're a person who likes to have a framework, you like to have a formula, there are a few different frameworks that you can leverage. The one of them that was popularized by the Autism Science Foundation is called the CASE approach. And CASE is an acronym that stands for Corroborate, About Me, Science, and Explain and Advise. And I've been teaching the CASE approach for a while, several years, and I know many pediatricians in particular really, really like this approach because it can help guide your thinking and help to give you those steps that can be helpful, especially if you're a little bit nervous about engaging in that conversation. So the steps of this approach are fairly simple. The first one is finding common ground. That corroborating is figuring out where are you on the same page, right? So if somebody says that they don't want to get vaccinated because they worry that it's too new, right? Acknowledging, I can totally understand that. I was worried because it was new too. If you were worried, please be transparent about that, because again, that helps to build that trust, and it helps to find that common ground with them. And then from there, you go into About Me. Share what you've done specifically to educate yourself on the topic. This is what I like to call, building your street cred. So, so in the case, if you were nervous about the vaccine being a little new, did you read the FDA briefing documents? Did you listen into ACIP or the VRBPAC meetings to get a better understanding of the science about the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine? Share that, right? Let them know what you've done to educate yourself on this topic. And then from there, and only from there, dive into the science. So you don't want to jump into the science right away. If somebody is nervous, the last thing you want to do is come at them, right? By telling them that they're wrong. We want to, again, first establish that trust, first establish that empathy before we dive into the science behind their very specific concern, right? So if they're nervous about the vaccine being too new, explain that process of how vaccines are tested and how we monitor for safety, and how, even though the COVID vaccines did go through the process more quickly than a lot of other vaccines, or than other vaccines that we have, it wasn't because we skipped steps. We checked all of those safety boxes. It was because we helped remove some of the barriers that are usually there with vaccination. Things like trying to find money and funding for clinical trials, things like getting those documents reviewed, right, before you can move forward to the next step. All of those things were moved along more quickly because of the urgency of the situation. We were in the middle of a pandemic. People were dying at a huge rate every day, but we didn't skip steps. It was very important that we still made sure that the vaccine was tested and that it was safe and that it worked like it should before it was allowed to be used wide scale in the United States. And so in that step with the science, really figure out where that person is in terms of, using language that will resonate with them, simplifying things if they're not very experienced with the scientific process, or not very experienced with the lingo. So simplifying it. And then also recognizing kind of maybe where they are in terms of health literacy level, but also in terms of information seeking. Some people get overwhelmed by too much information. Some people really, really like those details. They want to know more. They actively seek out more information. And so kind of gauge, if you can, where people are at. But I like to, if you're not sure, I always like to default to the simplest version, right? And then allow them the opportunity to ask questions or to kind of gauge whether or not, you think it was understood. Then you can continue to explain more, but starting at a level that everybody can understand, so that everybody gets that information that they need. And then only once you've done that, explaining and advising. Not all of us, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not in a position to make medical, to give medical advice or make medical recommendations, but I can share what I do based on the science. And I can say, based on all of this information, I was really excited to vaccinate my child, or I was really excited to get vaccinated myself. So this is the framework. You are welcome to, if you're interested in learning more about this case approach, I'm happy to share resources for you. There's a link on the bottom, but if you email me later, I'm also happy to share it to you via email. So how does this look in action? So we're going to go through just a really quick example of a person who has a concern. I'm worried that if I vaccinate my child against COVID, it will give them heart damage. This is something that we're hearing a lot, especially here in Texas, and especially among Latin American populations. And so how could you respond using the case approach? Here's an example. I totally get that. As parents, we want to do everything we can to protect our kids. We want to keep them safe, and reports of heart issues are scary. Would it be okay with you if I shared a little bit about what I've learned about these reports? And then you go into about me. So we found our common ground, we're going into about me. As a community health worker, I often take classes to learn more about certain health topics. And I recently took a class about COVID vaccines that talked about this very thing. I learned that, and now I'm going into the science, I learned that while there are some people who get swelling in or around the heart muscle after the vaccine, it's really rare. And when it does happen, it's generally mild. People are able to recover fairly quickly at home with only rest and medication. But that same swelling can happen after getting COVID too. And not only is it more likely after COVID, but the swelling can be more severe and more dangerous for kids than what's being seen after the vaccine. And now we go into explain or advise. Because viruses can cause heart damage, as well as a bunch of other serious issues, getting vaccinated is a much safer option, even with this rare but serious risk. which is why I vaccinated my son as soon as he was eligible. Have you talked to your child's doctor about this concern, or have you asked your doctor about this? So that was just one example of a framework that you can walk through. There are others that I also really love that, again, leverage those communication, evidence-based strategies. Motivational interviewing is a really great guided framework for how you navigate a conversation, not just about vaccines, but about a range of health behaviors. Reflective listening, again, is a really great approach. I wish I had more time to dive into both of these, but if you're interested and would like my resources, again, my email will be at the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to share and point you into the direction of some more info on these frameworks. All right, so now I want to just transition a little bit and talk about what are some of the things that could go wrong during a conversation, or some pitfalls that can happen, and how we can avoid them or navigate them. So one of the first pitfalls is not knowing how to start. How do you even get started on talking about vaccines, especially in today's climate where it can feel like talking about vaccines can be charged, right? So, whoops, sorry about that. So one thing you can do if you're a healthcare provider in a healthcare setting with a patient that you have a relationship with, you can start with a direct presumptive recommendation, where you say, I see that you haven't gotten the COVID vaccine yet. I think it's really important you get that today. Do you have any questions before we bring it in? Right? They still absolutely have the opportunity to decline, but you've made it clear that you think this is in the best interest for their health, that you've made this strong recommendation, but then you've also opened the door that if they have questions, you can go ahead and address them right then and there. But if you're not a healthcare provider, or you don't feel like you're in a good position to give medical advice, you can still talk to people about vaccines. You can still ask your friends, your family, people in the community. And you can do this in a wide variety of ways, starting the conversation maybe through a less direct approach. Something I did very early as the vaccine rolled out was I asked if people needed any help finding an appointment. I'd say, oh, hey, I work in public health. I've been helping people get vaccine appointments. Do you need any help with yours? I'd be happy to help you. Right. And that opened up the door for them to either tell me, yeah, I'm already vaccinated. And I could be, I can encourage them and say, that's awesome. Or they could say, no, I'm not going to do that. And then that would open up the door for me to say, well, why not? Would you mind telling me a little bit more? Or if they just weren't comfortable talking about it, then they could just shut me down right there and just say, no, thank you. And then end it there, which is also okay. But through that less direct approach, that helped open the door for a lot of conversations. Another way you can do is just kind of offering up your own story. I went to vote shortly after getting my vaccine, and I had my Band-Aid still on my arm, and the person working the polls had said, thanks so much for coming out today. And I said, oh, I'm so excited to be able to get out. This is great, and finally vaccinated, so I feel really comfortable doing this. And that opened up the door for her to say, oh, you got the vaccine, how was it? And we ended up engaging in a conversation where she had questions about the vaccine, and I was able to address them. I think a lot of folks might go into these conversations just kind of bracing themselves for a fight, but these conversations don't have to be a fight, and they're definitely not a debate. They're a way for us to help those individuals, that movable middle, right, who still haven't found the information they need, to help them get that information to, again, make a truly informed choice. Another pitfall can be, again, expecting to change someone's mind, especially right away. It's not about winning. It's not about that. It's about helping them get the information, context, support that they need to make an informed choice. And it's very likely going to take multiple conversations. The example that I shared earlier about me getting the HPV vaccine, that I think was a great example of how it doesn't necessarily always have to take a long time to be able to have those conversations and get people further along that confidence spectrum. But often it takes multiple conversations. And I've talked with community health workers that feel just frustrated and dejected because they engage people in conversations and then they get shut down over and over again. And I strongly encourage them to think about not that one conversation as the end all be all, but that conversation as a collective. Again, remember, people bring their whole selves to this vaccine conversation. So maybe you're talking to them today about vaccines and they're not interested. but then it kind of plants a seed in their brain. And next week they see something on social media about somebody getting their kids vaccinated and how excited they are. And that helps that seed grow a little bit. And they inch up that spectrum. And then maybe a week later, they see an article about somebody they know who passed away from COVID. And then that kind of affects their attitudes and behaviors and kind of drifts them up this confidence spectrum. And so I know that we want to be able to talk to people about these vaccines and help them get vaccinated right away. But sometimes that it takes time, right? But acknowledging and understanding that each of these conversations builds towards something and helps people move up that spectrum. And where they are in that spectrum can really affect how far they have to move up it, right? But don't go into these conversations expecting to win a debate, because that's really not what this is about. And it can really start to hurt and erode the trust that you have with that person. Another pitfall is operating outside of your expertise and or experience. We know that nobody is an expert on everything. It's totally okay to say, no, that's a great question. Let me find out and I can get back to you. We know that working in some communities, saying I don't know can really hurt somebody's credibility. So if you feel like you can't tell somebody I don't know, there are lots of different ways that you can say, this situation keeps shifting because the virus keeps changing, or that's something we're still actively researching. Here's what we know right now. And so acknowledging that, especially when you don't know something, that transparency is really important, because that helps contribute and build to trust, right? And vaccine confidence is all about trust. So we want to protect that trust, because once we lose it, it's really hard to get back. So saying something that's outside of your expertise, and then you might end up being wrong, or you might give them, the incorrect information, and then they come back to you and say, hey, but you lied to me, right? That trust is gone. That's really hard to build back. So being transparent, being honest, and being authentic, that can really help to not only contribute to that trust, but then it also gives you an opportunity to follow up with them at a later time. If you don't know, but you can get back to them, follow up and get back to them. And that's another opportunity to talk about vaccines and another opportunity to address concerns. Another pitfall is getting off topic. As I mentioned, this topic of vaccination, especially COVID vaccines, it has gotten contentious for some people. It can get really charged. It's in some cases it's gotten very partisan, and so some folks can get, again, they brace themselves for a fight, or they're in the middle of the conversation and it gets it gets into partisan politics, or it gets into religion, or it gets into something that you're not comfortable engaging with, or that is off topic. So one thing that you can do to help bring the conversation back on topic is, again, finding that common ground. You can, if you're hearing that they're talking about how information keeps changing, or how they feel like they've been lied to, acknowledging that and saying, I can understand, that's frustrating. I hear you about how frustrating that is, or I get it. It can be hard to know who to trust right now. Can I share a little information about where I go? Where I go that I think is incredibly trusted information or reliable science-based info. And so finding that common ground can bring you back to that core issue, or to bring them back to that core concern. And then another way that you can do it is by asking open-ended questions, saying, oh, how did that make you feel, or why did that concern you, right? To, again, kind of bring it back, getting them to focus more on the conversation at hand. Another pitfall can be using personal stories specifically to scare people. So the way that we present information is really important to how it's received. It can affect how it's received. So if you personally have a story of loss or survivorship, and you present it in a way that's aggressive, or like this is going to happen to you, that can cause people to kind of shut down from that conversation. But those stories can also be really powerful when presented empathetically as a perspective. So my story about my grandmother, unfortunately, my grandmother did pass from COVID. I was very grateful to be able to go and see her before she passed. Thanks to vaccines, I was able to do that safely. But my grandmother did end up getting COVID, and because she had leukemia and because her immune system was weakened, she did everything she could to protect herself, but ultimately there was just too much COVID in the community. She got it and she passed away very quickly. And so sharing that story can help people empathize, and it can help you empathize with them, right? We connect to others through our personal experiences and through our stories. Vaccinate Your Family has a wide variety of stories about a wide variety of vaccine preventable diseases all on our website. We have some amazing videos that were made about vaccine preventable diseases that are also on our website that I'd be happy to share with you. But that's also another wonderful way that you can connect with people and open a door to continued conversation is through the power of storytelling. I think in public health, we love science, we love data, but not everybody does, and it doesn't always resonate with folks. But stories can be very connecting. And so I'm happy to share those resources, but you can also find them at vaccinateyourfamily.org. Another pitfall is letting the conversation get heated. So we talk about how it can get off topic. Another issue is if it gets, where things start to ramp up. One of the most important things that you can do if a conversation gets heated is to take a deep breath. Because if you get heated, then the conversation just ratchets each other up, right? So taking a deep breath and staying calm, like biting your words, don't say anything, but maybe ask questions instead, right? So by asking those open-ended questions, acknowledging their frustration, acknowledging their feelings, and inviting them to share more with you, and then staying quiet and listening, that can help lower the temperature of the conversation. It can help make sure that they feel heard. And then if you use techniques like reflective listening, where you repeat back and say things like, what I hear from you is that you're really angry that the pandemic has made it harder for you to see people you love. Is that what I'm hearing you saying? Is that correct? Then that gives them an opportunity to correct any misconceptions and to make sure everybody's on the same page. But it also gives them a chance to feel heard. And that can make everybody feel a little bit more calm. And then you can always change the subject and come back later. You can say, look, I know that this is a tough topic, that this is a really hard topic. I'd love to talk to you about it more. Do you think that maybe we could revisit it at another time? And that's another way you can kind of let the conversation cool down. And then not knowing how to end in a positive way, always coming back to what you have in common, coming back to that common ground, and encouraging a step, however small. So if they were expressing concern because they saw a video on YouTube, you can invite them, please send me that video on YouTube and I'm happy to share my thoughts about it. Or, if they have this specific concern that's related to their health, invite them to talk to their doctor about it if they have a healthcare provider that they see, or just making a note to discuss it next time, inviting them to, please just make a note, we'll talk about it next time, or jot down your questions and bring it back. We'll talk about it the next time we see each other. But encouraging them to take that next step, even if it's not a vaccination appointment, it's still a step toward that vaccine confidence being stronger. So really, really briefly, I do want to touch about online misinformation, because it does require a slightly different approach. There are some techniques that you can use when you engage on online information, but there's also the way that social media is constructed can impact how misinformation spreads. And again, that misinformation, it's not the only reason that people are hesitant or that people might have less confidence, but it can contribute. So we can't ignore it. We do have to address it. And there are a few different ways that we can do that. I just want to give a shout out to Jennifer Zavolinsky, who I think is on the call, who helped create some of this portion of the content about how we can address social media and misinformation. So thank you, Jen, for your contributions here. The one most important thing that you need to remember about misinformation on social media is the more you engage with misinformation, the more you are likely to see it. Because of how news feeds are set up on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, the more you engage with misinformation and the people who post misinformation, the more likely you are to see it again. Even if you're there to refute it, you're still more likely to get to see that misinformation and more likely to make it seen by other people, because social media platforms do prioritize information that's more engaging, that people click on, right? So we want to be very thoughtful and careful about how we engage with misinformation online. So there are a lot of different techniques. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to cover these, but again, just pointing out some of the ways that some of the tactics used to spread misinformation are specifically designed to evoke strong emotions. Things like being afraid for babies or being angry about big pharma, right? Evoking those strong emotions so that we don't pause to think about it. So we have that knee-jerk reaction and share it so that more people then see it. Another thing that happens, and it's happening increasingly more often, is those who are disinforming, those people who put out disinformation, so incorrect information on purpose, they're often targeting very specific populations. They're co-opting, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement. They try to connect modern day vaccines with atrocities like the Tuskegee experiment, which if you're not familiar, please look it up. It's a very important context for today's vaccine conversations, which is not a correct connection and something that we've done a lot of work since to try and make sure it doesn't happen again. But preying on the trauma that people have experienced to feed them disinformation and to try and get them to believe disinformation, it's a tactic that is all over the internet right now. And we need to be very careful and help build the capacity of communities to help them identify this misinformation when they see it, or disinformation when it gets targeted toward them. And this is especially important for populations that don't speak Spanish or that don't speak English. There was a study that was put out that found that 70% of false information in Spanish did not get a content warning label on Facebook. So misinformation is spreading faster in non-English languages, and it's more likely to go unchecked in non-English languages. So it's especially important that we work with those populations and help engage and combat online in those languages as well. So there are 3 really quick tools that I want to share with you that can help combat misinformation or address misinformation specifically on social media, and I'll go through them each very quickly. One of them is to report, push back, report. The major social media sites have a way to do this. It's often starting with those 3 dots where you click it, and there are ways that you can report specifically health information now on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also report misinformation on YouTube. And so just looking for those 3 dots can help just to flag. It doesn't always help to get them taken down, but if enough reports happen, sometimes it can get those misinforming posts taken down. And some people have been removed from platforms for posting misinformation too often. Another thing you can do is, again, get people to pause and think about what they're seeing. So if a misinforming post is up there, just doing a very quick comment, a new comment, right? That just says, I know this sounds scary, but it's not the whole story. Here's more about what happened. And then posting maybe a link, or here's some important context that you might not have seen, and then sharing more information about that. And that way, as people are scrolling by, they might see the headline, but then they might also see your comment right below it. That gets them to pause long enough to maybe be a little bit, to take what they just saw with a grain of salt. What you don't want to do, though, is get into a back and forth in the comments, especially if somebody posts a misinforming comment. Replying directly to that comment and then getting into a back and forth can make it very likely that that original misinforming comment gets seen by more people. So instead of addressing that misinforming comment by replying, you can start a new comment on that thread. And that way, if they engage with you in a back and forth, your comment that is factual will be more likely to be seen. Another thing we can do is to amplify science-based content. So we can address misinformation by dialing down the volume of all that misinformation out there by flooding it with more science-based information. And so we can do this in a number of ways. We can engage with science-based posts, even if it's not usually something you would engage with because it's something you know already, or something that's not surprising. Go ahead, if it's factual, if it's science-based about vaccines, like it, comment on it, share it. Those kinds of engagements really help to make sure that it gets seen by more people versus those misinforming posts that rely on that gut reaction, those strong feelings. Those are more likely to get shared because of that than the science-based posts. So we need to very proactively try to engage with science-based content. Another thing you can do is post your own content that's science-based. This is also very important if there's misinformation circulating in your community. Like, for example, some folks are really concerned about fertility, for example, infertility and COVID vaccines. Being proactive about posting information you've heard in a way that's accessible, right? But about how the vaccines are not linked to fertility and what we know about that. Putting that out in the community can be a way that you help, again, dial down the volume of that misinforming information misinformation that's spreading. I'm going to flag, there is a wonderful resource called the Debunking Handbook. There's another one called the Vaccine Misinformation Management Field Guide. I would love to share that resource if you're interested. I'm happy to share it. They walk through a formula that you can use. I think it's a really helpful formula when you're crafting messages for debunking messages for Facebook, for example, or for Twitter. It can be a really helpful formula to help walk through how can you use research-backed communication strategies for addressing misinformation. I'm not going to have time to go through it all today, but I really love that resource. Again, it's the Vaccine Misinformation Management Field Guide or the Debunking Handbook. They use very similar processes. Some quick things about debunking: pick your battles. Again, not every piece of misinformation needs debunking. Remember, the more somebody sees something, the more likely they are to believe it. So we have to be careful about resharing misinformation for the purposes of debunking it, right? Especially if not very many people are talking about it, or it doesn't seem to be, it's not believed by a lot of people, you don't necessarily need to address it. But if there's misinformation that's spreading, a popular YouTube video or a popular post that's making the rounds or being shared a lot on WhatsApp, that would be a really great time to be able to go ahead and post science-based information debunking it. And using those best practices for communication that a lot of you know already, avoiding jargon, avoiding acronyms, using things that, using language that is simple to understand for everybody, matching the message with the audience, speak to what matters to them. A lot of communities, for example, again, we work with Dia de la Mujer Latina and work with a lot of Latino populations, and family is incredibly important in a lot of Latin American culture. And so appealing to the value of family and understanding that people love their family deeply. And so talking to them in a way that focuses on that value can be beneficial. And then consider the messenger. If you're debunking misinformation to a group that doesn't trust you, that debunking message isn't going to work as effectively as if that message was shared by a trusted messenger in that community. And then again, stories can be really powerful. If all we hear is people who got COVID and it was fine, nothing happened, then they might believe that vaccines aren't necessary because COVID is not a big deal. So sharing powerful stories that kind of refute that misinformation that's spreading, or misleading information that's spreading, that can be helpful, as well as sharing positive experiences with vaccination. Every year I post a flu shot selfie where I show how excited I am to work with, to get vaccinated, and how my whole family is vaccinated, and we make a big day out of it. And every year people come to me and say, Robyn, thanks so much for the reminder, or hey, that reminds me, I had a question. And it's an opportunity to put out not just positive experiences for people to see, but also opens the door for continued conversation. And then just be prepared for pushback. Know how to do your security settings on social media if you're going to engage in the platforms. I'm happy to share more about this and talk more about this offline. There's also a really great recording Jennifer Zavolinsky and I did with the HPV Roundtable that's on YouTube that covers a lot of these tips more in depth, and I'm happy to share that too. So some of the resources, I mentioned the UNICEF's Vaccine Misinformation Management Field Guide. Stronger, there's WHO has how to report misinformation online that you can go to. And then certainly our website, vaccinateyourfamily.org. You are welcome to also visit. We have a lot of questions and answers, a huge COVID vaccine FAQ where we just updated it with lots of information about kids under 5, where we wrote it specifically so that it could be accessible to everybody. And we have it available both in English and in Spanish. And with that, I am happy to field some questions. I see Judy has one in the chat. I work with a community of parents of young girls. Parents, and more importantly, grandparents are very opposed to HPV. Any specific ideas? I think really leveraging that toolbox about listening to really understand what their specific concern is. If they're opposed to the HPV vaccine, I would really encourage you to open up the door to conversation and say, I understand this is an important decision and people want all the information to make a truly informed choice. Can you share a little bit about why you don't want to get vaccinated, or why you don't want your grandchild vaccinated today? And listening, truly listening for what that underlying concern is. So that you can then maybe go through those steps of sharing information, finding that common ground, using that reflective listening. But if the toolbox is the same, regardless of whether it's HPV or COVID, the toolbox of listening with empathy, asking open-ended questions, encouraging them to find their own benefits. And I would agree, I would also suggest that you try to understand what they value. So if the reason, for example, that they're opposed to the HPV vaccine is because they want to protect the health of that child, then really trying to frame the information that you're sharing with them about how the vaccine can protect the health of the child, that is why we do that, by helping to protect them against cancer. I'm trying to look and see if there's any more questions. I'm very open to them, but I'm also, again, available via email. You're welcome to email me. Somebody has asked for the slides. I'm happy to share the PDF via email if you'd like that as well. I don't know if there are any more questions, but I'm happy to hang out for a little bit and answer them in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robyn. I really appreciate it. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. And I agree with Judy. Your presentation was very wonderful, outstanding, very enlightening. I definitely love the case approach. I live for acronyms. I think that's probably how I made it through pharmacy school, trying to remember everything. So I definitely love the tools that you gave us. So definitely everybody's echoing wonderful presentation. So thank you so much. We really greatly appreciate all the helpful tools that you have given us so that we can make sure that we're equipped to be able to really speak with our patients and help them navigate through the questions that they have and making sure that they feel heard. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unmute, now unmute. Thank you so much. So we're very excited to get to this last segment at the end of the summit. So thank you all for sticking around. You're definitely in for a treat. We have with us visiting Dr. Reed Tuckson. So he is the former Commissioner of Public Health for the District of Columbia. He's a multi-generational Washingtonian, and he has served the city during the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, where he learned to respect the importance of collaborating with community leaders and residents to advance health. Dr. Tuckson is a founder, board member, and steering committee member of the Black Coalition Against COVID. So we're so excited to have him with us today. I've had the privilege to meet him about a few weeks ago, where he asked how could he help, how could their coalition help with the efforts that Immunized DC has right now. And he is absolutely amazing. So I'm so excited that he is here with us today to speak with us. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Tuckson.
Well, thank you very much. Let me see if I can figure out sharing screen. This is always the scary part. And hopefully this will, somehow this will work. Can you see my slides?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's see. Let me do the share screen again. And do that. Share. All right. And then how about, let's see now. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, and hopefully the embedded stuff will work as well. Let me know, Damika, if anything goes wrong, and just holler out. Okay.
Yes, sir.
It is an absolute joy for me personally and all of us at the Black Coalition Against COVID to join with you all in this effort. As Damika mentioned, we at the Black Coalition Against COVID have really been focusing on COVID, but now starting to turn our attention to other pressing issues. In humility, we reached out to Dr. Nesbitt at the Health Department and asked, what's the one thing that's most important that you would assign for us to do as we continue to fight COVID, but look at doing other things? And she said, joining in the fight on immunizing our kids against preventable childhood illness. And so our first call was to you all at Immunized DC, and we now see ourselves as operating as under your umbrella for this activity. You are the leaders. You are the ones who have the credibility. We're newcomers to this, and so we will bring our firepower to it. I think that people, just giving you a very fast but as complete sense of who we are. The Black Coalition Against COVID was begun on Easter Sunday, 2020, as soon as we saw the first inklings of how dramatic this pandemic was going to be in our community. As having been the former Commissioner of Health during the height of the AIDS epidemic, I have learned well the fundamental importance of a community-based grassroots effort to marry with what government does. You have to have a top-down and a bottom-up simultaneously. And so I started calling every community influencer that I knew, people that I knew who had reputation and capacity within the life of the Black community of DC, and got an amazing response from all of them. And so I reached out to the faith community, organized labor, beauticians and barbershops, musicians, poets, academics, people representing the returning incarcerated citizens, Black health professionals, just numerous components of the Black community in DC, and got so many of those to our community steering committee. All volunteer. We have no money, no resources, no administrative support, no nothing, but we just launched out and began our work with faith and hope and sweat and tears. And in doing that work, one of the first things that we knew that we had to do was to get the message out about what was going on with this disease and why it was so important. And so we used our community leaders to create a series of PSAs that we begged and borrowed and pleaded radio stations to run. I'll just give you a quick sample of some of those. Ambrose Lane, one of our steering committee members and one of the major community organizers.
This is Ambrose Lane Jr., a member of the Black Coalition Against COVID and chair of the Health Alliance Network, DC's largest community-based health advocacy organization. The coronavirus epidemic is very serious, negatively impacting and affecting Black people more because of higher rates of diabetes, cancers, asthma, obesity, and other chronic diseases due to the lack of health. And
it goes on. By the way, Damika, can I just check to make sure, was that the audio, could you hear it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We also started to think about getting ahead of the curve for contact tracing, knowing that very early on in this disease, people were not going to be necessarily welcoming of the government, quote unquote, coming in and asking about who you've been with and the nature of how intimate that contact was. And so we tried to reach out to some of the people that would be most concerned, and that would be some of the more militant or parts of our city. And so we reached out to Greg Carr, professor of African American Studies.
Hi, my name is Greg Carr, professor of African American Studies at Howard University and a member of the Black Coalition Against COVID. The other day, I got a call from the health department. They're engaged in the process of contact tracing, which is the way to identify folks who may have come into physical contact with someone who may have had the virus, and also finding out who those folks may have been in physical contact with. They assured me that what I shared with them would be confidential.
And so you get the point. And then we reached out to the faith community.
My name is Frank D. Tuckson, and I am a member of the Black Coalition Against COVID. As a minister of long-standing in the city, I well understand the relevancy of Jesus' message to us, that we are responsible to each other as God's children. The COVID pandemic reminds us.
And so you get it. And then labor.
My name is Joss Williams, head of the DC Coalition of Black Trade Unionists and a member of the Black Coalition Against COVID. For almost 40 years, I led the trade union movement in the DMV. I am urging everyone to go out.
And so by picking on these kinds of segments, they were able to translate that message and shoot it through their networks so that we had broad distribution.
'Tis the season. Hello, my name is Shauna Peaks, and I'm a supporter of the Black Coalition Against COVID. As we approach this holiday season of joy and peace, I am pleading with you, don't give the coronavirus as a gift this year.
And then finally, one last one I'll share is how difficult this was for the people working in our hospitals.
My name is Dr. Shelley McDonough Pinkett, Chief Medical Officer at Howard University Hospital, and I am a supporter of the Black Coalition Against COVID. I watched my colleagues fight to save the lives of patients with COVID-related illnesses. On behalf of them, I urge everyone in our community to stay at home, wash your hands frequently, Wear your mask every time you.
And then as we did that work, we then segued over to using specific kinds of outreach messages and regular engagements. This was something that our faith leaders came together to produce, called COVID Talks and Beyond, the Black Church Edition, which was for pastors to help them be able to know what they needed to know, but also how then they should engage with their flock.
Well, good morning, good morning. This is the day that the Lord has made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. I am Pastor Kendrick Curry of the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church, and we are excited today because we're with the Black Coalition Against COVID-19, and we're here for COVID Talks and Beyond.
And so the church community has been obviously very, very engaged, and we've been very fortunate. We also have amongst our midst the leader of the Virtual Health Ministry Program in DC, which is a coalition of 4 churches that from the very beginning of the pandemic, we helped them be able to hire and engage health navigators within the church, deputized by the pastor of congregants, who then were trained and supported in reaching out and surveying constantly the needs of the congregation, particularly early on when we were in the lockdown phase. And so people that were suffering from domestic violence, from substance abuse, and so forth, food insecurity, all these sort of came about. We were able to sort of identify those and then married them with social workers at Howard University School of Social Worker to help them to find solutions to their problems. We also engaged early on our musicians. Many of you are aware of Anwan Big G Glover, one of the prominent go-go musicians in town. And we felt like we needed to get him and to be able to wear a mask. And then again, this is all early on, and sort of say, I'm wearing mine, you should too. Again, the power of cold calls. I mean, we made a cold call to his manager and got him, and then a cold call to the metro system. And said that your metro workers, your subway drivers, bus drivers, ticket takers, all of them are at great risk because they're on the front lines. And so it's in their interest that people on the subway system wear their masks. And they agreed. And so we found a photographer like in a hurry, ran Anwan over there with a mask, shot it. And before long, we had that poster, and they were now put all through the subway systems across the city. Again, showing us that even if you don't have any staff, and if you have no money, but just a group of hardworking people, amazing things can happen. We then segued over to using, and I was really enjoyed that last presentation on misinformation and how you have to really have a lot of skills to do that. We also learned that the messages for health need to be translated often into the lingo and the rhythms of the people. And so we created 3 poetry slams with prize money for winners, which we, again, got out of our pocket. We didn't have time to wait for a whole bunch of grants. So we put our money in a pot and offered the winners of the poetry slam, K through 8th grade, 9 to 12, and then adults. And they then created an enormous volume of poetry. The winner was actually, which was funny, was young Christian Alvarado. And he did just a terrific job with his. Then a lot of us older people began to learn what you can do with a cell phone. And we learned how important and how easy it is to make videos on your cell phone. And so we did another competition for which we called the IMAS.
Hello, my name is Dr. Reed Tuckson, former health commissioner and a member of the Black Coalition Against COVID. The devastation from this COVID pandemic continues throughout our community, and we must maintain our vigil. Unfortunately, some of us are relaxing. and opening the door for the virus to spread. Our coalition is sponsoring the first ever I Mask for DC Video Festival, which we broadcast citywide on June 26th, and will award cash prizes for the best 30-second videos produced on iPhones that teach our community why we must wear our mask.
The winner was an incredible young ninth grader, and this is what she did.
COVID-19 is a killer, and it's killing Black people at a higher rate. We make up 75% of COVID deaths in DC, but we can change that. COVID-19 is passed through droplets and suspended particles in the air. That's why wearing a mask is critical. Face masks combined with physical distancing would help reopen the economy more safely and crush a second or third COVID wave. Wear a mask for your family, friends, and you.
And she's, again, that was presented actually also on one of Mayor Bowser's press conferences. Ninth grader did that. Just incredible. There was an adult that came in second who actually was a pastor. We also were concerned about the issue of depression, and especially on our young kids. We read an article in the newspaper about Arena Stage having a special video that they had produced with young actors to talk about this very issue. So we called them up, cold call, and immediately got them to join with us, along with the Washington Teachers Union, and produced a television show on a WHUT TV and also simulcast on WHUR. I must say that Howard University has been extraordinarily beautiful in being a partner to us. So we were partnered with the Arena Stage and these folks, and we produced this town hall where we showed video clips of children talking about the issues, and then had psychiatrists and psychologists who are experts on children to talk to parents about how they need to learn to help kids navigate the challenges in the early stages of the pandemic. This is just an example.
It's just upsetting to be a senior in this quarantine. At the same time, I feel like I'm not really allowed to be upset about it because, I mean, there's a pandemic going on and it could be so much worse. Like, particularly for me, I know there are people dying and sick and people who can't see their loved ones.
So you get a sense, and so really remarkable. One of the most impactful events that we came up with was to do a time of remembrance. You will recall that during a significant portion of the first half of the pandemic, people were dying extraordinary rates, but could not have funerals. There were no way to grieve together. And so we partnered again with WHUT and WHUR to produce a time to remember the lives lost to COVID. And we filmed a whole series of families talking about their loved one and showing the photos of it. A very dramatic Sunday afternoon, to say the least. One of the wonderful emails that we got back was, "Thank you for allowing my children to have some closure." We weren't able to talk to our father, to touch him, to hold him, to let him hear our voices. I would text him every day with a scripture. We all miss him and wish this was a bad dream. Thanks for creating a platform that allows grieving families to say one last word to their loved ones. And so this was a very powerful experience for us. We also partnered with beauty salons and barbershops. This was an initiative that we undertook at the request of President Biden, who personally in a news conference mentioned that he's asking the Black Coalition Against COVID to take this issue on. We partnered with the very fantastic people who are the true leaders of this effort at the School of Public Health in Maryland, Dr. Stephen Thomas, who's just incredible in terms of his leadership in this space, and the company Shea Moisture. And together, we found 1,000 beauty salons and barbershops that were trained to actually put forward a positive message about this pandemic, trying to overcome all the nonsense that gets kicked around in the barbershop and the salon. And then many of them being trained by their local public health department to be vaccine administration sites. And so again, very important opportunity. Well, early in our journey, when we started to realize that the vaccine was ultimately going to be the most important thing, we knew that the clinical trials for a vaccine were going to be critical. To support then getting good support for clinical trials, given all the past history of anxiety and tension and so forth when it comes to African Americans participating in science, we reached out and became what became the national arm of the Black Coalition Against COVID by having the presidents of all 4 of the medical schools, Howard, Meharry, Morehouse, and Drew, along with the president of the National Medical Association, the Cobb Institute of the NMA, the National Black Nurses Association president, the National Urban League president, and the largest publisher of health for the Black community, blackdoctor.org. And so we brought all of them together as the national arm of the Black Coalition Against COVID. The first thing we did together was to benefit from a media company called Real Chemistry. And again, we had no money. I want to keep emphasizing no bucks, but by just finding people who cared. Real Chemistry is an incredible media conglomerate. And so they worked with us, and this is probably the most important thing that we produced early in our tenure. And I'll let you hear this.
Dear Black America, we love you. We affirm that Black lives matter. And as Black health professionals, we have a higher calling to stand for racial justice and to fight for health equity. In the spirit of unconditional love for every single Black American, we have locked arms in an initiative to place the health and safety of our community at the heart of the national conversation about COVID-19. Respect for our Black bodies and our Black lives must be a core value for those who are working to find the vaccine for this virus that has already taken so many of our loved ones. Our colleagues across healthcare know that we are urging our community to take safe and effective vaccines once available. However, for this to be successful, they must do more to earn your trust now and in the future. We are on the front lines in care delivery and in key decision-making roles, from the lab to the clinic to the virtual boardroom. We urge you to hold us accountable. Please wear your masks, continue social distancing, hand washing, and avoiding indoor events until vaccines are widely available. With the holidays around the corner, we want nothing more than to break bread with our loved ones. But tradition cannot stand in the way of our health. We also ask you to join us in participating in clinical trials and taking a vaccine once it's proven safe and effective. We know that our collective role in helping to create a vaccine that works for Black people and that we trust has an impact on our very survival. Please visit blackcoalitionagainstcovid.org/love-letter to learn more about the work we are doing to keep our beloved community safe. We will keep you in our hearts while we work to create a world that is healthier and more just than the one we know today. Love, America's Black doctors and nurses.
And so we clearly were obviously concerned about the issue of trust, trustworthiness, who are the messengers, and we always feel like we always have to start from a basis of love. We then started partnering to do these national town halls, and we've done more than 25 national and local town halls reaching millions of people. Our partners have been very interesting. Here we, at one of the early ones, bringing together a clinical trials town hall with a conversation with noted Black scientists and others. We have had many encounters with Dr. Fauci. We did some with other, with minority, preparing the ground for minority health professionals to start getting ready for vaccine dissemination efforts. And here we partnered with the National Hispanic Medical Society, the American Indian Physicians Association, and many, and also the APHA, and as well other sponsors. And this has been really kind of fun. We had the people leading that unfortunate name at that time, Operation Warp Speed, and the person at the CDC, Nancy Messonnier, who was responsible in leading the efforts at that time for community engagement. We did those by engaging with Black political organizations. Again, working with noted science and experts. We partnered with Black women who, of course, are always the health officers of the family. And here we were able to really engage with noted the Sisters United for Reform. And if you look at the logos there, you also see all of the Black women sororities all came together on that evening. We also focused on Black elderly and had the advocates of the people who are the care workers for the elderly, who themselves were unfortunately not very prominent in being vaccinated. So we had to get those who were working in nursing homes, senior assisted living, in-home support people, anywhere that somebody was taking care of seniors. We wanted them on this town hall to talk to them about why it was important for them to get vaccinated themselves, in addition to encouraging their patients. We collaborated with the Congressional Black Caucus. We partnered with, as I mentioned, the 4 minority medical societies, but also we partnered with the advocacy organizations of the 4 minority medical societies and bringing all of them together. We worked with Black men and their fraternities together with a special show just dedicated to them. We know how many Black folks live in rural America, and so we focused on the rural American segment. And then we focused in on children. And when the vaccine first started to be rolled out with kids, we were able to bring together a focus on what do parents need to know with the Surgeon General, Peter Marks, who was almost all of our shows. He is the single person responsible for making the vaccine approval decisions in America. And Peter was on every show just about that we were able to do. And then beauty shops and barber shops. We focused on Black organized labor and had a special town hall just for them. So again, a very robust set of activities. One of the things that our partners, blackdoctor.org, and I will say to you that we could never have had a better partner than them. When we started and started to look at polls in April of 2020, the polls that we were doing online were saying that 60% basically don't trust the health system. They're not going to get vaccinated. By January, we could see that that number of 58% was down to 27%, and yes was way up. And we saw that continual progress over time towards getting people over. The last slide, and then I'm going to get to the children's preventable childhood vaccine and close out, was we also had to get more creative. I'm not a social media person. I'm a little old in the tooth for some of that, but we got good stuff. And we had some fun stuff that we decided to do. Like there's a special thing on that we noticed online where celebrities read mean tweets. It was a prominent feature. So we stole that idea.
Once COVID is over, it's starting to sound a lot like when Rihanna releases a new album.
So they had me doing all these things, and I would read it and either laugh or be upset or whatever, and then I'd respond very quickly to the tweet. We partnered a lot with the federal government, and we were proud that when Kamala Harris unveiled the COVID community core, we were one of 4 speakers, along with the Surgeon General, to be allowed to present and to talk about what we think needed to be done. And then I'll end on the general and get to the specific with this. Another partner of ours was the Black women's media company, Joy Collective, as well as the Ad Council, who have been great partners for us. And as we all know, the Tuskegee syphilis study has been an overwhelming challenge for almost 50 years to overcome. So many people, every time I would go on the TV or radio to talk about getting COVID vaccinated, always Tuskegee came up. It turned out that we had a chance to meet the descendants of Tuskegee, of the study participants. And we were happy to know that the descendants were all vaccinated and were very upset that their relatives, their parents and grandparents, were being used by forces of mischief to get people not to do the right thing. So we sent a film crew down with the Joy Collective people and the Ad Council, and we filmed them. This is just a short segment of something that we produced.
I am the daughter of one of the men in the study, Freddie Lee Tyson. I'm also the daughter of Johnny Mae Neal Tyson. I have to include my wonderful mother because the two of them was on the journey together. My father had congenital syphilis from his mother. When penicillin became available, the men were denied treatment. There has been a lot of references to the study as to why some people may or may not want to take the vaccine. A lot of misinformation is out there. We have the ability to find out the facts and the opportunity to talk with people who could help us go through the facts and don't deny ourselves the opportunity the men were denied.
And so the idea again that the tragedy of Tuskegee was that people were denied access to the drug that would have saved their lives. And what these descendants are clearly saying is it makes zero sense for people to use that and deny their own selves access to the drugs that would prevent them from becoming ill in the first place. That it's just illogical and nonsensical. And so we were able to get that out quite broadly. We also partnered with the NFL Alumni Association and conducted several town halls around the country with NFL Hall of Famers and other awardees, well-known names that came together. And so at the end of the day, our story has been one of collaboration. When you don't have any money and you don't have really resources, you reach out and you grab everybody that you can grab and you just pull them together. As the old saying goes, it's amazing what you can achieve when nobody needs to get credit. So now we are the Black Coalition Against COVID, but we are now transitioning ourselves to the Black Coalition for Health as we start to move into these new areas. And we are enjoying this new partnership with Immunized DC, which we are more than honored to do. So here's a quick sense of what we're trying to do now. Under the leadership and the guidance of Immunized DC. First, as you saw in my setup, we do enjoy PSAs, but this time, instead of doing sort of PSAs where you're begging, we found some money now, and we've got some resources from the work that we've done has earned us a few dollars. And so we are buying ad time for the children's preventable vaccine messages. And so we've got them running now on all of the Radio 1 stations, getting that demography, also the praise and the worship community, HUR, WTOP, and all of those. And so we're not begging for time to get our commercials out now about why it is important for every child to be immunized for preventable childhood illness prior to attending school. We're not begging, we're buying our airtime. And that's been really a lot more fun than begging. This week alone, we have been on WPFW and WHUR talking about this issue and how important it is. And we will continue to every day put that.
My name is Dr. Reed Tuckson with the Black Coalition for Health. As a physician and parent, I understand the importance of our children being vaccinated to protect them from preventable childhood illnesses. The science is clear. These vaccines are safe and extraordinarily effective. Don't forget, This year, every child must have proof of immunizations in order to attend school. So don't wait until the last minute. Contact your healthcare provider now. For more information, go to dchealth.dc.gov.
And so that's the message. That's one of them. We also have a couple of others, one from a noted pediatrician, Dr. Yolanda Hancock, and all those are in regular rotation. We will also use a TV and web distributed town hall like we've done before. And so we have a community town hall on the importance of child immunizations, which will be aired on WHUT-TV and simulcast on WHUR and Sirius XM on the 27th and 28th of July, getting people ready for Immunization Awareness Month in August. That TV show will feature Harold Fisher, noted host of the Daily Drum, Dr. Nesbitt, our health commissioner, Chancellor Farabee from the school system, Dr. Damika Walker, Dr. Yolanda Hancock, and we'll have someone probably from Children's Hospital that we will also add to that show. So we're very excited about that going forward. We also have editorials and op-eds that are running in newspapers. This is one that will be running in the East of the River News and their related publications starting, I think, next Saturday. You can sort of see here, but very in a nutshell, you know, I mentioned that I've had the privilege of working on behalf of the health of citizens of DC for over 40 years. My experiences have taught me that the protection and preservation of human life is a sacred and inescapable individual, family, and community-wide shared responsibility. Certainly, we can all agree that protecting and advancing the health of our precious children is at the top of any list of priorities in this regard. Every parent and caregiver should know that as we continue to experience the tragic health and social consequences associated with the COVID pandemic, immunizing children to protect them from preventable childhood illness is now more important than ever. I especially troubled by the pandemic that caused our children to miss extended periods of time attending an in-person schooling. As a result, children in general and children of color in particular suffered setbacks and so forth. Please be aware that children in DC will not be allowed back to school without proof. We cannot afford any child. The science is clear. Child vaccinations are effective and proven over many years to be safe. Because of advancements in medical sciences, children can now be safely protected against more diseases than ever before, and so forth and so on. So we talk about those issues. I mentioned that I'm aware of the unfortunate efforts by people with misinformation who tried to mislead parents that routine child vaccinations are unsafe and can lead to conditions such as autism. Thankfully, the scientific evidence studied over many years has debunked these false and dangerous claims. There is no question that vaccinations are safe and very effective. Please do not let these dangerous people cause our children to suffer unnecessarily from preventable illness. Today is the day to make your appointment. We are reminded, by the way, in this editorial that that we want them to have documentation. I didn't mention why, but we know that the registry is suboptimal right now. And so we're in all of our messaging reminding people to get good documentation and have that available to present to the school. So that's where we are there. We are extensively engaging with community-based organizations and faith-based organizations. We are sending our messaging not only through, again, we'll be having paid ads in the Washington Informer, but we work with many community organizations. I've just listed a few: Life Pieces to Masterpieces, which is focused on the artistic development of our children, the UPO, the Leadership Council for Healthy Communities, a faith-based initiative, and I could have filled this up with all of the partners, but we are creating and will be distributing very shortly materials that will go through their email networks so that they will be able to transmit this information to all the parents in these community-based, faith-based organizations. We have just now been working with an effort by the Capital Area Food Bank and WHUR to they're putting food bags out throughout the community, trying to make sure that kids have something to eat during the summer. So many kids, when they're not in school, do not eat well. And so we are now stuffing brochures and materials from the health department and others into the food baskets, so that all of that, each time someone gets a food basket, there will be information about preventable childhood illness and why they need to do it. Lastly and finally, we are making extensive use of social media. And we are using the theme that, the clock is ticking. So in other words, each week we say only seven weeks left, and then 6 weeks left, to get it done, trying to build a sense of urgency going forward. So we want to thank you all very much for the opportunity to be a part of you. We are a foundation that hopefully that you can help, is one of the foundations that you can step on as you continue to do your work. But we are very clear who's in charge, and that's Immunized DC. And we are working at your behest to bring what we have to bear in this fight. So I will stop sharing my screen. Let's see if I can figure this out. Stop share and bring us back to, I haven't had a chance to look at the chat or anything like that. So Damika, what's the best way to proceed?
Robyn, so first of all, thank you so much. Awesome work that you are doing. We are so excited that you have partnered with us. We definitely count it as a privilege and an honor to have your support and all of your resources and just your energy in moving this work forward. So it's great to have you all on board with us for sure. No one had any questions, but of course, everybody is saying awesome work that you're doing. So everybody is just as excited as we are to really just have you again, you all with your passion for being able to get this information out to, the Black community, just all the work that you're doing, all the partners that you all have engaged. So I definitely think it's amazing. We're so excited for what's coming up. Let's see, we do have one question. Can you talk about the materials that are being stuffed in the baskets?
Yes, they are the brochures from DC Health. I'm pretty sure, but Michelle, by the way, I should have mentioned Michelle Blackwell, who is my right-hand person on all of this. And by the way, Michelle came to us as she's a go-go musician, and in addition to being really terrific. Michelle, if you would put that, I'm sure that I know you just went and picked up the brochures. Can I assume, Michelle, you can just type in real quick whether that is, I'm sure it's from the DC Health Department, though, I'm pretty sure. So she'll let you know in the chat.
Perfect, thank you so much. Oh, and then of course we also
she said, so it is from the DC Health Department. Kim Henderson, and I do want to give a shout out to Kim. Kim Henderson is Communications Director for DC Health, and Kim is a fabulous partner to work with. Oh, Damika, you muted again.
It keeps muting me. Thank you. Awesome. Are there any other questions that anyone has for Dr. Tuckson? Definitely take advantage while he is here with us.
Great. Well, I just appreciate it, Damika, and I'm sure we have multiple times to respond. One of the things, I'll just make a commercial, save me an email to you, but I really would like to get Robyn's slides. Robyn has got very important stuff there on misinformation, and I think we want to do whatever we can to spread that teaching to all the people who work with us at the coalition. So we'll be reaching out for that. But thank you all for what you do, and this is a relationship that is ongoing, and we're gonna all kill ourselves. September 1 is the date, and we're trying to light as big a fire as we can. So we'll keep at it. Thank you.
I believe that you would definitely do it. So thank you so much. So excited. Right. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful. So again, thank you all so much for joining in today's virtual summit. We would not have been able to do it without your participation. We hope that the speakers, the information that was presented today was helpful, was informative, but most importantly will be something that you can go back and use in your practice, as I said at the beginning of the webinar. That is the whole purpose of this summit, is to be able to have the tools that we need to make sure that we are informed, and make sure that we are informing others with the right information and debunking all the misinformation as well as disinformation that we know is circulating in this area. So again, your participation is much appreciated. And again, as we said, there will be the opportunity to receive your CE credit. So an email will be coming after the conclusion of this event. So please make sure that you do watch out for that email so that you can log in to complete the information that is needed for you to receive your CE. Also, at the end of the summit, once the Zoom closes out, there will be an opportunity for you to leave feedback for us. There will be a very short survey, but we, as Immunized DC, would greatly appreciate if you would complete it so that we can know how we can enhance our summits going forward, as well as make sure that we cover topics that will be advantageous for you and or your colleagues. So please, we're asking that you would complete that. Don't skip over it because we do like feedback so that we can continue to grow and continue to improve so that we can be the best for you all and the community. So again, so excited that we were able to have this time with you today. Thank you for joining in. We hope you have a productive rest of your day. Continue to be safe, continue to be well, continue to stay encouraged, and continue to do the great work that you are doing in the district to increase immunization rates. So I hope everyone has an amazing rest of your day and continue to join us every time that we do have a platform for us to continue to share. Thank you all so much.